We have no approval of minutes, so we would like to go over upcoming events for the next couple of weeks and months. On April the 10th through May 27th, we have the City of Orem second annual spring cleanup at various locations. April the 26th through the 27th, we have the World Financial Group grand opening at 6:30 p.m. On April the 28th, we have the UVU Office of New Urban Mechanics Civic Innovation Summit from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. On April the 28th, we have our annual Arbor Day event at 3 p.m. at the cemetery. On April the 29th, we have our Sunset Heights East Neighborhood Picnic at noon. On May the 2nd, we have a Miss Orem Scholarship Program mock interviews at 6:30 p.m. at the City Council chambers. May 11th through the 12th, we have several council members and the mayor traveling to Hillsboro, Oregon to visit with the city up there on their landscaping and city design. On May the 20th, we have the Miss Orem Scholarship Program pageant at 7 p.m. at the Sierra. On May the 29th, we have a Memorial Day program at 9 a.m. at the cemetery. On June 1st through the 7th, we have the City of Orem filing period for the positions of mayor and 3 city council seats up for election. On June 5th through the 10th, we have the City of Orem Summerfest. And on June 17th, we have the Transportation Advisory Commission annual bike ride at 9 a.m. at Palisade Park. We would now like to ask Mark Cranmer if he'll come forward, and we have a presentation from Rocky Mountain Power.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Council, Mr. Davidson, and staff, thank you for having us this evening. I was asked to just give you a quick update on the energy project that is nearing completion. We are about 91% complete. We anticipate the project will be 100% complete by the end of June, and the final day that we're under contract is July the 17th, so that's another day you can put on your calendar. And we're honored to have Kathleen Hoffman. She's the regional business manager from Rocky Mountain Power, and she works with the City of Orem, and also Richard Wood from Rocky Mountain Power. He's a lighting specialist. So, Mayor, with your permission, if they may come up.
Yes, please have them do so. Actually, I can come down right there with
And I'd like to just say congratulations to Orem City for participating in the Watt Smart Energy Savings Program. We all know that saving energy is an important factor in our modern lives today. And the city accepting this big check serves as an example to all of its citizens in energy efficiency. We know about LED lights, and they are new and state of the art. They save energy and last longer than the old-fashioned light bulbs. They are available for home use, and there are all kinds available so people can purchase them for their homes. And so the city is not only receiving this check today, but will be saving energy money every day going forward. So with that, we just want to say congratulations to Orem City.
Thank you very much. I think we'd like to have one of those checks every city council session. We would now like to make a proclamation for Arbor Day, and I would like to read that. This is a proclamation whereas on April the 10th, 1872, the state of Nebraska planted an estimated 1 million trees, which became the inspiration for annual Arbor Day recognition. Whereas Arbor Day is recognized annually throughout our nation, and whereas Arbor Day is celebrated each year on the last Friday in April in the state of Utah, and whereas trees beautify the landscape, enhance property values, moderate the temperature, clean the air, reduce erosion, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas the Tree City USA program was started by the Arbor Day Foundation in 1976 and is celebrating its 41st anniversary this year. And whereas Orem has again been recognized for the 24th consecutive year, along with over 3,400 other cities in our nation, as a Tree City USA by the Arbor Day Foundation, and desires to continue its urban forestry practices. Now, therefore, I, Richard F. Brunch, Jr., Mayor of the City of Orem, Utah, proclaim this Friday, April 28, 2017, to be Arbor Day in the City of Orem, and encourage citizens to improve the quality of life in Orem by planting and properly caring for trees on that day, dated the 25th day of April 2017. Is there a motion to accept this proclamation?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We have another proclamation. This is a proclamation for and honoring Rebecca Reno as the Prudential Spirit of Community Day service person. Whereas, however effective government may be in serving the needs of its citizens, the soul of our city and its vitality as a place to live and work depend on the relationship of families, friends, and neighbors. And whereas strengthening those bonds is not as much in the hands of institutions or governments as it is in the hearts of the people, individuals who volunteer to help people of all ages, races, and religions cope with illnesses, overcome hardships and barriers, adjust to social changes, and fulfill their potential. These volunteers are the unrecognized, unsung heroes of our society. Whereas Rebecca Reno, recently named as one of our state's top honorees in the 2017 Prudential Spirit of Community Awards program, exemplifies the value of volunteer community service and is a role model to other youth as well as adults in our community. And whereas a surprising number of volunteers in communities across the nation are, like Rebecca, a student contributing time without expectation of reward other than the gratification that comes from helping others. Some of these young people work in established groups, others seek new and unique ways to help others on their own. And whereas recognizing these young volunteers and encouraging others to follow their example is the aim of this nationwide program conducted by Prudential Financial and the National Association of Secondary School Principals. Its aim is to reach into every community, into all 50 states and the District of Columbia, to identify and honor these unsung heroes locally, state by state, and then nationally, in the hopes that their recognition will serve to stimulate others to volunteer service. And now, therefore, I, Richard F. Brunts, Jr., Mayor of the City of Orem, hereby proclaim April 25th, 2017, as Rebecca Reno Prudential Spirit of Community Recognition Day in the City of Orem, and I commend Rebecca Reno for her outstanding volunteer contribution to others and to our community, dated this 25th day of April 2017. Do we have a motion to accept this proclamation?
I'll move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is Rebecca here? Can she come forward, please? We appreciate our young people who give service to our community. We'd now like to go ahead to some city manager appointments. We'll turn the time over to Jamie Davidson.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening we have an opportunity to reappoint Mr. Gary Waite, who has served previously as a member of the Board of Adjustment, and we would like to recommend, or I would like to recommend, that he be reappointed to serve in that same capacity as a Board of Adjustment member. In addition, we've had recently a member of our Planning Commission who is making plans to move outside of our city, and so her move is necessitating a change in the membership of our Planning Commission. And this evening, I'd like to recommend Mr. Mickey Cochran to serve as a member of our Planning Commission. I understand Mr. Cochran is here today. If we could invite him just to stand and be recognized, if we could, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. And so at this point, Mayor and City Council, this does require your approval by way of vote and consent. So,
do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We appreciate those who are willing to give service. We now have time for personal appearances. We would ask that those who come forward give us their name and hold their comments to 3 minutes. And we'll start off with David Busoth and then hear from Richard Jones.
I'm David Busey. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for hearing my moment. I want to remind tonight the City Council that the Southwest Orem Neighborhood Association doesn't oppose UVU growth. We love having this magnificent institution, as you know, for our neighbor. Rather, SWONA opposes UVU growth on Orem campus. I said that in my speech to you on January 24th, but the Daily Herald article on my speech left off on Orem campus, and later an editorial railed on our association, our neighborhood association, SWONA, for resisting UVU growth. This was a mistake, an oversight. SWONA welcomes UVU growth, but we oppose growth on Orem campus because it is already unusually dense in terms of students per acre, both by Utah standards and national standards. UVU reports that they have 36,000 students, 8,000 of which are local high school students taking concurrent enrollment classes, but the other 28,000 students come to campus regularly. This is a very large student body on a commuter campus that puts pressure on the surrounding streets and residential housing. The PEG and ICO developments east and north of campus that have been proposed to City Council could be a good thing because some of these students could be housed in a car-free way. Or they could be a horrible thing, encouraging UVU growth and bringing more cars to Southwest Orem. Judging from President Holland's March 30th letter to the mayor, UVU leadership doesn't yet get this. SWONA opposes these zone changes unless and until it can be clarified which outcome we're going to get. To be persuaded, SWONA would have to see a major restructuring of the UVU master plan instead of the current plan, which is designed to service over 40,000 students on Orem campus within 1 decade and over 60,000 students within 25 years. Instead of this craziness, we expect UVU to create community colleges, campuses that are satellites in Vineyard, Lehigh, or Saratoga Springs and Payson, where the student population growth is expected, controlling the size of the Orem campus student body would benefit the students, the staff, the professors, and neighbors. We want them to incorporate a cap on the Orem campus in their master plan.
Thank you. We'll have to stop there.
Thank you.
And now I'll hear from Richard Jones and then Murray Lowe.
Thank you. My name is Richard Jones. I live at 1159 South, 300 West.
That's about 70 yards north of the back of Lowe's and those businesses along 1200 South. My daughter was one of those that built a home on the south side of 1200 South, and those homes were all removed to make way for that business park that developed along there. So I've seen it all in the 46 years that I've lived just on the same piece of property. I could have benefited by a zone change there to build another home or two, but I preferred the quality of life that was there over what financial gain I might have received. But I have watched over those 46 years I've lived there as ribbon cutting after ribbon cutting and other ceremonies have taken place, welcoming new businesses and more population into Orem to build the tax base so that they could pay for everything. It never works out that way in my experience. New population brings more problems with water, crime, and development than you can ever catch up with otherwise. So I'm here just to oppose any zone change that would allow housing to encroach upon the neighborhood which I live, which is essentially east of 400 South in Orem. I'm not against schools. I taught at BYU, and I've watched that development as it is expanded. And I said, when they bought Provo High School, sometime UVU is going to buy Lake Ridge Junior High School as well. People laugh, but it's going to happen. It's just expansion, and I've seen my life change in my family from when they had played in the gravel pit, which is now UVU. We look up the street to the other end and we see the mall, which has become a monstrosity, if you'll expression. And I just want to put in a plea for maintaining single-family residences where you have a view other than the back of a big building, box building, or into the windows of an apartment complex next door. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Murray Lowe. Thank you, City Council members and Mayor. I'm also here to publicly express my opposition to the PEG development, not to all student developments, but as it is currently constituted. I'll be sending you an email letter afterwards because 3 minutes is not enough time. We think UVU loves this development because it acts as quasi-on-campus housing and it'll help increase graduation rates. And we hear from UVU about underutilized health, athletic, cultural arts facilities. This makes sense, but we don't think this development qualifies as quasi-on-campus housing. There are at least 3 reasons. Number one, the residents are not required to be full-time students. Number two, residents can bring cars to the facility. BYU Heritage Halls just developed over 2,700 units. Lassonde at U of U, 400 units. There's 0 parking and 10% parking respectively. Why do the U and BYU not want students to bring cars? Because it takes them away from the campus community that they so desperately want. Number 3, this housing is not targeted at on-campus students, typically freshmen and sophomores. The price point's too high. Each occupant has a private bathroom and bedroom. The $450 to $500 price point is targeted upscale rather than the typically described UVU student. Saturday, I met a UVU student, had a half-hour conversation with him. He told me he was living in Raintree. Why are you there? He said, well, actually, most of my roommates are at Raintree because it only costs $300 a month, and we all have these standards that we maintain. And then he said, if I sign a 16-month contract, my cost will go down to $250. So as I was talking to this guy, I thought, this is the kind of guy I want as a neighbor, but he will never be a neighbor of mine living in this PEG development. What I think PEG development will bring to Orem are affluent students who drive cars. Now, I have lots of neighbors like that already. I don't need any more of those. What I want is people who are genuinely committed to UVU fully and they're all in. Finally, there is a traffic concern. If the PEG facility were to grow to 3,000 students and there's a 0.8 parking ratio, that would bring 2,400 more cars to our neighborhood. If they take an extra 5 trips per day, that's 12,000 more trips on our streets. On the other hand, if those students don't have to bring cars and 80% of them reduce their trips by 3 per day, that would actually reduce the number of trips on our streets by 7,200. The net numbers here are astronomical. There's a 20,000 trip per day differential, depending on whether this development has people bring cars or keeps those cars away. If no student parking is allowed, then we make our neighborhood much better, rather than making much less safe and more concerned. Again, our proposal is not a win for all parties, so please go back and have us work together. We want to work together.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Roger Harrison and then Jeff Evans.
Getting quite a few of us tonight. I'm Roger Harrison, and I live at 1158 South, 350 West, so very similar neighborhood to Brother Jones there. My children have gone to Westmore, Lake Ridge, and Mountain View. I've raised my whole family. I've lived there for more than 20 years, okay? And by the way, thank you for serving, okay? We do appreciate you, even though we don't come visit you very often, but we do appreciate you. But I am opposed, and my family opposed to any zoning changes for our neighborhood. And I'm going to reiterate a little bit what Murray has pointed out here. The PEG development is right across from Lake Ridge. Okay, the land is across the street from Lake Ridge Junior High. They're proposing around 1,600 beds, these apartments. The apartments will be 5- and 4-story apartments. They're tearing down about 20 homes. These are nice homes, over $250,000 a piece for these homes. So we had about 100 people there in our nice little cul-de-sac, and they're going to put now 1,600 people. That worries us. Okay, it worries us because of the 1,000+ cars that are going to be on 400 West, 8 South, 12 South. All of those streets are congested already, especially when class is going to start happening, and they'll only get more congested, right? So that's the one concern, is cars. The other one is just safety of our students. Walking to school, playing in our yards, you put another 1,600 people there instead of families. We don't know what's going to happen, right? We don't know what they're going to do. And again, when they come out of that apartment complex, they're going to go on 960 South, which leads right into 4th West, which is Lake Ridge entrance, or they're going to go over to 12th South, which is 4th West again, and they're going to be going up and down 4th West. So that's, for us families in that neighborhood, in the Lake Ridge area, we're worried about traffic and safety. So, in my last little minute, we would like the zoning to stay like it is. We like our neighborhood, we like our homes, and we want the zoning to stay. We don't want to increase the number of apartments around our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Joseph. I'm sorry. Jeff first and then Joseph.
Thank you. Yes, just my comments are going to be pretty similar to the other gentleman that spoke in opposition to the zone change on the PEG / Palos Verdes proposed development there. I might add, I would see the future of that if it does happen. The existing neighbors, which I'm one of them there on 400 West, right across the street, right by Lake Ridge Junior High, most likely would be moving at some point because the quality of the neighborhood is going to be affected so dramatically. When they do move, the values that they're going to get for our properties is probably less than we could get now before this development goes in. I can't see anybody choosing to move in next door or directly across the street from anywhere from 1,500 to some projections in time 3,000 students in 5-story tall buildings. Which, by the way, right there, the reason they called it Lake Ridge, we had one of the most beautiful views of Utah Lake, the lake mountains beyond, and the sunsets in the evening. That would be a thing of the past, and it's Lake Ridge is a special little ridge there. Also, they call it Sunset Heights for a reason. right next door there. So I think the overall quality of life it's a no-brainer. I mean, I don't have to bring in impact studies or a lot of statistics. I think anybody with any common sense will be able to see that if that goes in, the quality of life goes down. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was his last name?
Mr. Mayor and Councilman, thanks for your time. I've been a resident. My name is Joseph Carlson. I live 1026 South Coventry Circle. I've been a resident of Orem for over 50 years. And throughout that time, I've had this pet peeve that drew to a tipping point recently. My pet peeve is the way the city allows junk on private property. I mean, literally, piles of junk. And I'm told that we are powerless from this. Reply to that point. Recently, I passed a junk yard on a private property on a beautiful street otherwise that many, if not all of you, travel all the time on your way to Costco. It's on 8th East. Okay? So I came to the police station and reported it. I had an officer promptly reply to that. His reply really bothered me. Basically was, if you have a problem with it, why don't you volunteer to help to clean it up? And then he began to describe to me from the hip, flying by his seat of the pants, he told me what this policy, if there is one, and that's a question I have. Does Orem have a policy or ordinance that would give them the power to clean up these? And what he said in this conversation justified me being here. He says, this was bad. Go buy that one in 8th East and check it out. He says, there are a lot of these, a lot worse in Orem. Now, my question to you is, what can you do and when can you do it? And I thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go ahead and close the personal appearance part of our meeting and moved on to our consent item first. This is a resolution opposing the proposed elimination and further reductions in funding to the Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Program. I would like to make a motion on that the City Council pass this resolution opposing the proposed elimination and further reductions in funding to the Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Programs. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll start out with Councilmember Seastrand.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Okay, resolution passes. We'll move on to our scheduled items. The first one is item 16, which is a public hearing
Mayor.
that does not require any action by the City Council. Yes.
I just had a question. So you had a gentleman that asked a question, but I don't know that we were able to articulate how we're going to get back in touch with him on the answer to his question.
We could have city staff meet with him if he wanted to come up afterwards.
Okay, so that would be through Jamie would contact?
Yes.
Thank you.
So this is a public hearing with regards to Cascade Park Land Conversion Environmental Assessment, and Ryan Clark is our presenter.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm joined tonight by our consultant, Angie Fellows. She is with Jacobs, and she is working on an environmental assessment for a project that we're working on. And I'll get this presentation up. All right, so we're here to discuss a land conversion that's taking place with Cascade Park. In the 1970s, Cascade Park was purchased with city funds and with federal funds. The first grant was approximately $11,220 from the federal government, and that was used to purchase the property. Then in 1983, we acquired another $125,000, and the city matched that, and the park was built. These federal funds were part of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and there were special requirements with this fund that any park created with the money would remain public outdoor recreation in perpetuity moving forward. Over time, as staff has left the city and moved on, the knowledge of this requirement has unfortunately fallen to the wayside. In 2000, a cell tower was built in the park. as well as in many of our other parks, but this was the only park that was built with federal funds where a cell tower was placed. What this cell tower did is it converted a part of the recreational area into a commercial use, and that created a violation of those federal terms that came with that federal money. So last year, the state parks agency that is a stewardship of these funds for the federal government notified the city that we were in violation, and so we've been trying to come into compliance moving forward. So we're now retroactively completing an environmental assessment and a land conversion to rectify this problem. What you see here is a picture of the overall Cascade Park property. The blue line is the original purchase parcel. The yellow line that's solid represents the parcel without the road that was later built and created on the northern edge of the park. As you look to the left is north, so you can kind of orient yourself. Down at the bottom of the picture, the yellow dashed line represents the cell phone lease area. That lease area is a 50-foot by 50-foot square. It's 2,500 square feet. Within that area, the park is impacted by approximately 840 square feet. So while the lease is 2,500 square feet, right now the equipment on site impacts a smaller amount, but as we move forward, we're doing a land conversion on the entire lease in case a cell phone tower expands with future users, and we're able to capture that revenue that the city garners from these towers. So the conversion, like I say, is 2,500 square feet, and right now the park has been functioning in the same manner that it will be going forward. The impact from the cell tower is very minimal. So we're required, as part of this process, to find a suitable replacement property. This property needs to be approximately the same size, also needs to be worth about the same amount of money. And so we've been doing appraisals on the current cell tower site and on the proposed replacement parcel. We're also required to do an environmental assessment study on both parcels, and Angie here with Jacobs is doing that for us right now. As part of those requirements, we're required to have a presentation in a public meeting, which we're doing right now, and hold public comment so that the public can provide input. Over the long term, once all of these studies are done, then this will be submitted to the National Park Service for approval once the state passes it up the chain. The replacement parcel we're looking at is located on 800 North and 1100 East. It's a triangle parcel that was purchased approximately 5 years ago when we installed the 800 North Trail. At the time, we had the opportunity to pick up this property, not really knowing what we would do with it. But while we were acquiring right-of-way, we decided to do so, and knowing that hopefully down the road someday we'd be able to do something useful with it. Here's a picture of that property. Right now it's just covered with gravel and road base. As per the agreement with the landowner when we bought it, it would not have parking on it, and so it's been posted with signs that do not allow parking. The great thing about this site is it's located at the intersection of the Murdoch Canal Trail and the 800 North Trail. And so as people are traveling that right-of-way, we could provide a nice pocket park for people to rest at, to eat lunch, and just take a spell from their exercising. So with this process, we're following this timeline. When the environmental assessment is completed, it will be posted on the city website, and then there will be a certain amount of time to leave it on there. Angie, do you remember?
At least 30 days.
Okay, 30 days for public comment. At that time, we can close that public comment period, and then we will move forward with getting approval from the state coordinator and then the National Park Service. And hopefully with some budget approvals next year, we can schedule creation of the pocket park in around fall of 2018. For those that would like to view this draft environmental assessment, it will be posted on the city website in May. And any comments that anyone has, they can reach me at that email address or that phone number. And I'm also on the website, on the city's economic development website, all my contact information. So if anyone is not able to find that information today, I'd like to pull up this pocket park, if I could. I can get my mouse back. I'm going to unplug for 1 second. I have some concepts that we've put together showing what this pocket park could look like.
Ryan, how big is that area?
It's just under 2,500 square feet.
So it's pretty much
not big, but
a
it's
straight swap then?
It's pretty close, yes. And if we can get this to show up, I'll try one more time. This laptop always has issues with this. Well, anyways, we've done some concepts of what the park can look like. And what's that? Oh, there you go. Thank you. All right, there we go. So as you can see in this photo right now, or this concept rendering, the little pavilion with the picnic table and the drinking fountain, that already exists. And the fence is shown on the right-of-way line with the Murdoch Canal Trail and with the triangle parcel. And these are 3 different concepts that were put together by by Landmark Design that's doing our parks master plan. So we can do some pretty creative uses on that property that will make it quite appealing and enhance the beauty of that area. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
So I know that some residents actually have asked about when that would be made a park and have requested that because you have a lot of bikers that gather in that area. So that would be excellent. So any questions or comments from the council?
Just,
Yeah.
I think I saw in some of the renderings that there was like a little bike stand that they could do bike repairs and things like that. Was that part of all of the renderings, or was that just the one?
It is in 2 of the renderings, the first 2. The third one, I believe it's in there. If not, we can make sure something like that is included.
Because with that location, I'm sure that would get a lot of use right there at the start of the trail. So
absolutely. The neat thing about the third rendering is it shows how some of the right-of-way can be incorporated to make the area actually larger than what the city owns with cooperation from the county.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be an excellent spot. Any other comments from the council? Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to make a comment, please hold your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name when you start. Seeing that no one's coming forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And thank Ryan and Angie for being here and appreciate the information. Looks like a good swap of land. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 17, which is a resolution adopting the Northridge, Heatherridge, and Windsor Neighborhood Plan and amending the City of Orem General Plan to include the Northridge, Heatherridge, and Windsor Neighborhood Plan as Appendix E. And we'll turn the time over to Kirby. So push it where the red button's up.
Out is on.
Thank you.
Backward.
Kirby Schneidman here, long-range planner with the City of Orem. I'm really excited to present the Northridge, Heatherridge, and Windsor Neighborhood Plan to y'all. This plan has been in the process for a longer time than I've been here, but I've been able to participate in the tail end of it. And I'm going to be taking the lead in all these neighborhood plans going forward, working with neighborhood residents, and I'm excited to do it because I live in a neighborhood and I know what it's like to sometimes feel like how you feel and what you want for your neighborhood is maybe not communicated as well as it could be to leaders and staff. So that's the intent of this neighborhood plan, having these neighborhood plans. This is for these 3 neighborhoods. We've already completed a couple other plans that cover a few more neighborhoods, and we have several more neighborhoods in Orem that we'll complete this for over the next few years. The idea is about every 5 years, we're going to be updating. In the next 3 years, we're going to complete a plan for all neighborhoods in the city of Orem, and then we'll update it so that every 5 years, we get a fresh plan for every neighborhood. And the idea of having these plans is that we get you all the information you need to make decisions. When you have a decision that affects a neighborhood, this is a tool that you can use to ask yourself, not just what were the comments here at the meeting, but you can go back and look at the plan and say, what does the neighborhood feel like? What's the neighborhood see for itself in the future? It's also a great place for information. Going through this plan for the Northridge, Heatheridge, and Windsor neighborhoods, you'll see a lot of good census data, pictures, graphics, information that we have from the city. And that's a great place to start if you want to get to know more about the neighborhood. The most important part of the plan is that it provides the goals, objectives, and concerns in concise statements at the beginning of each section. That's the most important part. You have a copy of this plan. I'm going to give a website at the end where everybody can view it. I've made it widely available online where everybody can reach it, and we've been pushing that out. We want to make these plans available so that everybody can have them. I want to make clear, though, that this plan isn't going to solve, it wasn't meant to be the place to resolve all neighborhood concerns. So there were some neighborhood residents that came, and maybe their specific thing that they wanted to address didn't get in here. That's because if everything that every neighborhood resident wanted to include in this was in it, it would probably be 500 pages long. And it wouldn't give you all a sense of what are the priorities for the neighborhood. So by design, these are the major goals, objectives, and concerns that the neighborhood coalesced around. Here are some meeting dates that just show the progress we've had over the last year and a half. We've had 3 public meetings where we invited all neighborhood residents. At the first public meeting, we invited anybody who wanted to participate in the advisory council to participate as a member. We got about 40 people that volunteered for that position to meet with us additionally, because we couldn't have a public meeting every month or every other week. And out of those 40, not all came regularly. Everybody came to at least one, but we had several people that came to almost all of them. A couple of those are in attendance today. And we had an online public survey. And as I said, we have 3 neighborhood meetings. The last one was just a few months ago in March. And we had 120 people show up. We held it at the Northridge Elementary School. That's something we're going to be doing going forward with these neighborhood plan meetings, is we're going to try to have them locally as often as we can. And somebody offered a good suggestion that perhaps we could even have a couple meetings in 2 different elementary schools in the neighborhoods so that we make it really as easy as we can. So I'm thinking about doing that for the last one that we'll have in each neighborhood. I'm going to show you just a few pages of the plan. I know you've already seen it, so I won't dwell on these, but just for those that are in attendance, they can see a little bit of what the plan looks like visually. Here's the cover page, and on the right, just a graphical representation of Orem and the neighborhoods that have been drawn up. We couldn't do a plan for each single neighborhood because that would just take too long. We don't have the staff to do that. So we grouped neighborhoods together that were geographically close together. There's a great section on demographics that has a lot of interesting information. This information comes from the U.S. Census, from the American Community Survey. A lot of information on not just the existing conditions of the neighborhood, but the plans that the city has. And when I say the city, I mean the city residents that have come together in other plans, like the State Street Master Plan or the Transportation Master Plan. A lot of great information about the businesses that are located along State Street in the neighborhood, and also the office park. And there's a section on neighborhood preservation, showing our neighborhood preservation officers. I want to say there was a comment today about that the yard. These guys have a hard job. We work with them a lot. Actually, I don't know if you're aware how much we work with the neighborhood preservation unit officers. We meet with them weekly, and we're often addressing concerns that they have. And I just wanted to quickly say to the gentleman that if he's still here, it's very hard because on one hand, we all love that the idea that we can do whatever we want with our property. We also don't like it when somebody does whatever they want with their property. So it's a very difficult balance, and these guys are on the front lines of it. And let me tell you, they've got some great stories, but they really do care about Orem. They love it. They want it to be as great a place as they can, and they want to balance the rights that people have as well. There's a great map in that. There's a lot of actually great information in this plan. I hope you pour through it, not just you on the council, but y'all that are here in attendance today if you want to learn more about the neighborhood. A lot of great data. This is one map showing where the Neighborhood Preservation Unit officers have responded to calls that relate to things about their job, like yards that have weeds growing in them, or garbage in the yards, or multiple dwellings in the neighborhood that they've investigated. And one of the most important parts of the plan is at the end. Every one of the plans that we've created so far and every one of the plans that we'll create in the future is going to have an implementation guide. It's a very clear guide that shows the major objectives that we can tackle and gives us a time frame from when we can tackle them. And I want to say to the council that we on the planning staff are taking this very seriously. Jason Bench, our planning manager, has made sure that we're going to take each of these, compile them, and we're going to look at them regularly to see that, okay, we've got time and budget now, which one of these can we tackle next? So these objectives that are coming from the neighborhoods, we're taking these very seriously. We're using this input to guide our staff recommendations. When you get a staff recommendation from us, it's going to be informed by these neighborhood plans and the time we've spent meeting with staff, with residents. I won't go over all the major objectives, concerns, and goals that the neighborhood has. There's several for each section. I'm just going to go over one because it was the most important for the neighborhood, and I'm going to read it because these were some of the most important conclusions the neighborhood came to. So again, these are the major goals, objectives, and concerns as outlined in the plan for the land use section. Preserve the single-family nature of the neighborhoods through similar low-density residential development and infill. Plan for the future North Village District, which is 1600 North and State Street, to serve as a gateway into the neighborhood, allowing for new retail, office, and residential development. Limit land uses in other areas along State Street corridor to office and retail. Maintain appropriate setbacks, buffering, and height restrictions. Maintain current commercial zoning requirements in the neighborhoods, excluding the North Village District. Increase green space as remaining areas develop and provide public open space in each neighborhood. Seek future trail opportunities on the North Union Canal, but consult with the police department to ensure that public safety will not be compromised. Consider opportunities for community gardens. Each section has an outline just like this to make it very clear, simple, and easy for staff and for y'all, for council, to understand what are the major goals, objectives, and concerns of the neighborhood. I encourage you to read that. In conclusion, I just want to say that this plan reflects, like I said, major goals, concerns, and objectives. And this process has been driven by the residents and the Neighborhood Advisory Council. This is not my plan. This is not the planning staff's plan. This is not council's plan. This is the neighborhood's plan for themselves. And we weren't able to take a vote on everybody in the neighborhood. But if you read through this plan, I've talked with several residents who say this. If you read through this plan, this gets it. This gets what we want. They may not agree with every single sentence in that plan, but if you read it, every resident I've talked to said this is a good plan. It reflects how the neighborhood feels. I should say that with this neighborhood, with these neighborhoods and other neighborhoods I've been involved with, the major common concern that they have is new growth. That shouldn't be a surprise to y'all. I'm sure you hear it a lot. But the majority of residents feel that new growth is acceptable if it's well located and well planned. And as staff, I want to say that we don't have any other objective. Our objective is to understand what residents want and put that into a plan form. And what we've gotten from residents, from the State Street Master Plan, from these neighborhood plans, is that most of the neighborhoods in Orem, which are single-family in nature, single-family detached, the residents want to keep it that way. They like it the way it was. They've raised their families there. They want to see future families be raised that way. But they understand there's a lot of room for growth. There's a lot of demand for new growth. And most residents feel like, from what I've seen, that that's okay if we do it in well-located places and we do it well-planned. Just to make the point, there's a lot of discussion out there about maybe there's really not that much demand to be in Orem. There is a lot of demand. I've showed this to you before, and it might be new to somebody that's sitting in the audience, but The vacancy rates in Orem are extremely low, especially as you go north side of Orem, not just near UVU, but in the north parts of Orem. In the U.S. right now, we would see that the housing market, is neither a seller's market or a buyer's market. Right now, it's kind of balanced. And being balanced, that means that we have about a 12% vacancy rate. Now, you might think, that's high. You're telling me 12% of all housing units in the United States are vacant and we're in a balanced market? That sounds like a buyer's market if there's that many vacancy rate. But there's always going to be some amount of vacancy. You've got to consider all the homes that are for sale on the market currently. You've got to consider all the rentals that are out there. When developers build rental apartments, they don't build them to be 100% full. They build them with room, with demand to fill in that demand. And there's always people moving around, so there'll always be some amount of vacancy. So with a U.S. national market that's balanced, we have a 12% vacancy rate. Now consider Utah, where I showed you an article last week where KSL reported that we have a housing shortage that we have in the state of Utah. That's with a 10% on average in the state vacancy rate. Now for the city of Orem, we have a 5% vacancy rate in the city of Orem. Again, I know that's just a number, but let me stress, I've done housing studies before I worked with Orem. I worked as a consultant all over the country. That is an extremely low number to have it that low. And if you look at the neighborhoods in the north of Orem, the Northridge, Heatherridge, and Windsor neighborhoods, a 1.8% vacancy rate. Only 1.8% of all the housing units and rental units, everything that there is currently vacant. That's extremely low. Some people have said, well, what's wrong with that? It just means my home prices are going to go. It's good. Well, yeah, it's good for you, but what about for the people that are trying to buy new homes in Orem? What about your kids that want to locate near grandpa, grandma, and so they can take advantage of the free babysitting? And what about the next generation? It's very important. Because if we don't, here's the catch-22, and I won't take too much time to go into this, but I would love to speak with anyone about this who wants to speak more. If we don't make room for the demand, it doesn't mean it's not going to come. The place in Orem that will be most affected are your older single-family neighborhoods. Investors will have there'd be such a strong rental market that investors will be able to outbid home buyers that want to buy in these older neighborhoods. It's already happening. And then new families can't move in, because they can't outbid the investors that are going to rent those homes instead. And in speaking with the police department, I'm looking at trying to put this data together in a better way that really proves the point. But if you talk to the police department about where the worst crime problems are, we might have some specific crime problems in certain apartment complexes. But in general, the most crime that they experience is in the older single-family apartments, because what you have there, older single-family homes. Because what you have there are situations where you have absentee landlords that rent to somebody. They don't care who's there. They don't care how it affects the neighbors. They're just getting their check, and that's all they care. Whereas apartment complexes are much more accountable. They can be, and usually they are, for the renters they put in. And so it makes it a much more manageable situation when it comes to crime. So I just wanted to share that information with you because, again, let me reiterate that this is not my plan. This is not the planning department's plan. These are residents' plan. And the decisions you make about your city are yours, but we want to make sure you have the most information you can when you make that decision and be as well informed as you can. I encourage you to go to orem.org/planning. On there, you'll find all the neighborhood plans that have been adopted so far. You'll find the Northridge, Heatherridge, and Windsor neighborhood draft, which you're going to decide if you want to adopt tonight as part of the general plan. You'll also find the Aspen and Timview plan, which is in draft form, and you'll be voting to adopt that at a future meeting. Thank you very much for your time.
You bet. Councilmember Sumner, have you got a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, reading through your plan, there's a lot of talk about bike paths and creating more bike paths. How do you go about implementing those, or do you have a plan for those, or what?
We do. In the plan, there's you might have noticed a map that shows all the different future bike plans, bike routes, and that's also coming from our transportation master plan that incorporates more than just cars, but also bicycle paths and pedestrian paths. Redrawing some of those. Sometimes, if it's just a bike route, it's a matter of redrawing some lines, and that still costs money, that still takes time. But for those that we actually have to cut paths, obviously that takes more funding. How these are prioritized is not contained in this document. It doesn't lay out the timing and the structure of when these paths will be put in, but that the possibility is there. A lot of the most discussion that we heard in the plan was about the North Canal, and not all of that was in favor of it being put in. A lot of residents expressed concern because it's a lot thinner than where they would like to see for a big path. But there were a lot of residents who saw that as an opportunity for the future. I think because the Murdoch Trail is so popular, they'd like to see that duplicated in other areas if possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Leray.
First, I wanted to thank you. This is my neighborhood, and I was on the advisory committee, and so I think you've captured the essence. The other thing that was very important, and I want to commend the city, was safety, and especially in school zones, because we had a death of a young elementary school student, and a lot of the discussions were about safety. So I know that we now have the city now has a crossing guard, and many of the parents have said thank you. So I just wanted to say thanks for the work, thanks for capturing the things that are important, and appreciate the city's responding to some of the concerns of this particular neighborhood. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome, but I don't want to take too much credit because it was the residents like yourself that came for many hours over a period of a year and a half, volunteered their time, and I'm going to be asking many more residents to do that in the future, maybe some of whom are in the audience today for other neighborhoods. So the thanks really goes to the residents.
We have some wonderful neighborhoods here in Orem, some wonderful people that live in those neighborhoods, and some strong families. So this looks like a very good plan. Do you have any other comments from the council? Okay. Are there any persons within the audience who would like to make a comment on this plan? We will open it up to you if you'd like to come forward. Hold your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name.
John Reinhardt in Orem, Daniel Drive. Worked with Kirby and with it was Brandon, the previous planner, on many meetings in general. I really like the document. It's a very good document, and again, thanks to all those people that put in time, the planners and those invited guests that came to explain things to us, like the police and such. And I know this is just an advisory document, and that it's just to help you get a feel for what we like as a neighborhood. And again, I really like the document. And there was just one little item here, since we want to make certain that our communication as citizens to you can be as clear as possible. And for 4 years down the road, someone looks to this document. It may be you, it may be someone else. There is and we went over the land use already. We talked about two different objectives, well, many objectives, but two of them is limit land use in other areas along State Street corridor to office and retail, and also maintain current commercial zoning requirements in the neighborhoods, excluding the North Village District. Of course, in the neighborhoods also includes the non-district areas along State Street. There, and in the document on page 18, the end of section 3.2, there's a statement that it talks about here, according to feedback from some of the residents, high and medium density residential development should be discouraged. Other residents express support for well-planned multifamily residential located along State Street. That statement could be true if we had 1,000 people oppose and 2 people for. And I just wanted to express the feeling I got from the meetings and such was that there was a large group of people who again was on the side of that it should be discouraged, and there were a few that supported the well-planned. Now, myself, again, we want to define well-planned. I think there are great well-planned developments that could be there. in general, things like assisted living, et cetera. Again, just being paranoid, I just want to make certain that 4 years later or so down the road, it's not read and think, oh, hey, the citizens, a good portion of them want this, when in actuality, again, for the residential on State Street, most were opposed.
Thank you, John.
I respond quickly just to say thank you, John, very much. John participated as one of the more faithful participants in the advisory council process, and I want to thank him for his service and participation. I think his concern should be noted. There were residents definitely who were concerned about any new growth, and there were other residents who felt differently, and I tried to capture that in the plan, and I hope that message gets across.
Sure. Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'm Varden Hadfield, live at 748 North, 1180 East, just east of Harmons. I'm a big fan of the Murdoch Canal Trail, the Provo Canyon Trail. I see how much use it gets, and I was excited by the residents' support for converting the North Union Canal into a bike path. And I'm just interested in what would need to happen to do a model similar to what happened with the Murdoch Canal, where the water users actually use the water savings to pay for the burying of the canal. So it's more of a question and affirming support for that effort. It would go through these neighborhoods, really throughout Orem, and I think would be a significant boost to a lot of residents throughout the city. So that's all I had.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to add some quick comments. I too was part of this neighborhood advisory council, and frankly, I enjoyed the experience of working with Brandon and then with Kirby. Both were interested in listening to our input and helping us craft a plan that outlined our thoughts and opinions. And I even had some concerns right before this meeting. And I talked to Kirby about those, and he was really good to answer my questions and to alleviate my concerns for the plan. And frankly, some of the things I would have reworded a little bit, but I really think the sentiments were represented in the plan, and I can support that and appreciate the work that was put into it. And just one quick comment, the reason that we have, what did he say, 1.8% vacancy rate is because everyone wants to live in this area. It's a great place to live. People move from one house to the next house in the same neighborhood, and we really appreciate the work that went into this and hope that our efforts will be able to continue to preserve this wonderful neighborhood we enjoy. So thank you, Kirby, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Lene. Any other residents wishing to make a comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion and bring it back to the council. Any comments or questions or thoughts from the council? All right, I would be open to a motion.
I move that by resolution we adopt the Northridge, Heatherridge, and Windsor neighborhood plan and amend the City of Orem general plan to include the Northridge, Heatherridge, and Windsor neighborhood plan as Appendix E.
And I'll second that. And we'll start with Councilmember McDonald.
Aye.
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 Okay, that passes. And we'll move on to item number 18, which is a public hearing with regards to deep lot standards. This is amending section 22-6-8B of the Orem City Code pertaining to setbacks in a residential zone. And our presenter is Jason Bench.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight is simply an addition to our ordinance. This is currently found in the subdivision ordinance. This is simply taking it from the subdivision ordinance, keeping it there, and also copying it in the zoning chapter as well. So when people try to find where these deep lot standards are, they'll be in two different locations. So that's simply just taking the existing text and putting it into our zoning location. The Planning Commission made a recommendation for approval, and we're just here to make that change. Any questions that I can address?
Any questions from the council? Councilmember Lentz?
So my concern, and I think I mentioned this last time we spoke, my concern is just if we start to duplicate sections of our code in multiple places, it becomes more onerous to keep on top of those things as standards change, or if we want to amend this in the future, what happens if we amend it in one place, but it conflicts with what language is in the other place? So my question is just, is there any way that we can, instead of copying this whole section of text and pasting it into this portion, can we just refer to section?
We could do a link. We've just launched a new online version of our code, so we're going to do all online codes now. So it could definitely do a link to that. So we could do dplots and have the link that refers to that. I mean, that's an option that we could do. Prior to that launching, the online code was not available, and so that would make more sense now that we have that. And it's a simple of clicking the button and it links to the right page. So that could be an option as well.
So, because I like the idea of what we're trying to accomplish, but I'm just wondering if we can utilize that kind of technology to do it in a more manageable way going forward, so that we're spending less time with the administrative task of updating the code.
Right, and we could use the same section and just put dplots and then have the link, or the section in which then would hyperlink to that new section. That is definitely something we could do.
Okay. Plus, I don't want to have Greg and Steve carrying around larger and larger books and binders of city code.
We're going to slowly convert them to electronic version.
Councilmember McDonald.
So they'll carry them around like this?
Yes.
Are we also going to refer to these as flag lots in case people do a search by flag lots and don't find dplot?
That is an option. We could do that. I think if they do flag, it'll probably come up as a dplot. The online code will start to see what the search keywords are, and actually will learn, and then actually will start linking those together. So if somebody says dplot and they really mean flag lot, it'll actually pull up flag lot.
I just thought we could parenthetically say flag lot, so people, if they search by flag lot, would find it easier. But
we could, absolutely.
That's the detail you can work out. That's the way I would refer to these, and may not find them under.
Yeah, and in the industry, it's synonymous.
Would require a code amendment to do that? To refer to as a flag lot, would that be a code?
We would probably want to, you could do it in this link, and we'd have to come back and probably amend that.
I think you can add that as a amendment item if you need to.
We could do that in the future, yeah.
So what are you recommending right now as far as the word goes?
So we could reword it to have it still in this section, so amend this section, but just say
flag lot,
dplots, C section, whatever, and then we can hyperlink that to Chapter 17, which would accomplish the same.
But have the word flag lot in there as well?
Yes, we could, if you wanted to do that, yes.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions from the council? Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to make a comment, please hold your remarks to 3 minutes and start out with your name. Seeing no one's coming forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this. And any other comments from the council? Okay, anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion, Mayor.
Okay.
I would move that we amend sections 22-6-8B of the Orem City Code pertaining to setbacks in residential zones with the amendment of a flag lot
designation
in addition to the dplot.
Seconded.
Okay.
And just so that I understand, does that mean that we're duplicating it, or are we linking?
Do we want to just clarify and put the section that it's linking to and then have a hyperlink instead of putting all the words?
But you still have a written code at the moment. We're not totally over to electronic, is that correct?
We have converted to electronic, and the city will slowly convert to no paper copies.
But if we make this change, will there be a paper copy change that is put into the book?
No, we will not have a book. Donna, the recorders may have a book, and Steve Earle may have a book, but the rest of us will not have a book.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So are we okay?
Yep.
Okay, so move.
So, can I just clarify how we're doing it again?
So is your motion for a link or for copying it?
It's for so you no longer need the copy, so you're okay to do a link.
Yeah.
And also the name
and
change.
Add the flag lot designation that allows either definition to go to the same paragraph.
So if we would dplot standard / flag lot, and then we'll link it to that, and we'll add the section in the subdivision ordinance, if you're okay with that, and then have that hyperlinked.
Correct.
That'd be good. Okay. And we had a second?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and start with Councilmember Seastrand.
Aye.
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 Okay, the ordinance passes. Thank you. We'll now move on to a public hearing, which is Senior Dignity Care PD 48 Zone. This is an ordinance amending Article 22-11 of the Orem City Code by enacting Section 22-11-61 PD 48 Zone, amending the appendix of the Orem City Code by enacting Appendix RR and amending Section 22-5-3A and the zoning map of the Orem City Code by changing the zone at approximately 1785 South, 100 East from the R8 zone to a PD 48 zone, or to the PD 48 zone. Our presenter is Jason Bench.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just to orient you to this location, the Cherry Hill Elementary, which is in this location here. The subject property there is outlined in the aqua color. The park is at this location. So what the applicant is proposing to do is do 40 units, 10 structures with 4 units each. They'll have garages on both sides, so you'll see 2 units at a time as you approach each of those units, depending on the angle which you come in from. The streets that you see between the 2 public streets will be private. There will be gates. There will be one gate located there and the other gate over there. There will be pedestrian access, but the cross street from 200 East to 300 East, I believe, will be closed, and it'll be a private access only. The applicants are proposing to keep part of the existing home, the pool, as part of the clubhouse. They also are asking for an assisted living facility in the clubhouse on the second level. So there are only 2 uses that would be allowed in this PD zone. One is the condominiums, the other is the assisted living facility. All other uses would not be permitted. They're proposing 29% open space with connectivity with sidewalks, like I say, over to the park and through the neighborhood. Single story, this represents, I think it's just over 25 feet in height. The PD zone would allow 30 feet. There is an option for a bonus room on the second level of 40%. If you recall, the PRD zone allows up to 75% of that second story, so they're limiting it to 40 if any owner chooses to have that second story. These are just some of the elevations, so you'll see at least 2 garages per elevation. Just a couple other highlights. Setbacks are 20 feet. The maximum density would be 6 units per acre. Like I say, the maximum bed count in that assisted living component would be 20 maximum. It would be surrounded by a masonry fence. Each unit would have 2-car garage, plus there'll be an at-grade parking for visitors. So not including the driveway, there'll be a separate parking. As you can see throughout, there is some parking stalls off of that private drive, which would be part of the visitor parking requirement as per the ordinance that's proposed. There will be a HOA responsible for the maintenance of the facility. And the project would have to be in substantial compliance with the concept plan that you see here and the elevations. Planning Commission did review this request. It is similar to a PRD as far as the density is concerned. PRDs allow up to 7 units per acre. This one is at 5.9 units per acre. So it is below the maximum of a PRD. The Planning Commission did vote 6-1 to recommend approval to the council. So I'd be glad to address any questions that you...
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Could we have him come forward? If he could introduce himself and come forward.
Hi, I'm Mark Hampton, representing the applicant and Dignity Senior Care.
Mark, if I remember correctly, you are building a facility up on 2000 North or close to it off of State Street. Is that correct?
Yeah, the facility on up on State Street is a full living, 100, just around 100 beds. I can't remember exactly the bed count, but yes, it's 2 months for completion.
It's looking good. I remember when it came before the council and we approved it, and it looks like that's going to be a great
Mandated that
facility.
I make sure it looked good. I hope it satisfied.
Yes, it looked
Looked
excellent.
pretty good. Yes, thank you.
That'll be a great addition to the community for senior and assisted living, so.
Right, thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from the council? Okay.
Mayor, I had one.
Yes.
Sorry, is my
Councilmember C-Strand.
So on the assisted living facility, I'm just a question for you, Jason, on the code. Can you operate an assisted living facility in a PD zone?
Yeah.
Or does it need to be a commercial zone?
It would be entitled through this PD zone. So if the council approved it, then yes, they could operate.
So the code would be specific to this PD zone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We do have some, PDs spread throughout the community that, years ago we allowed beehive homes and other things in a residential zone. So that this is not unique, but the PD would allow them at this specific location.
So it doesn't have to be a commercial zone?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can I comment about it?
Yes.
To add a little bit of
Sure.
color? So, as you know, and if you've seen this property, it's pretty unique. It's a beautiful piece of property with a larger than average home on it. Mr. Jones and his family have moved away from this home and have had it for sale for a while. We think that a private community like this is interesting and pretty cool. Just a correction: these are not condos. These are homes. It's not a condo by definition. It's airspace. This is deed, title, fee simple home, and residents buy their home. These are for sale, and it is an HOA approved. The home will be. We're working with the architect now to render the drawings, prepare them for our next submittal for the subdivision plat and a review of the city council and staff. But the home is intended to be split in kind of two uses, not in half, but two uses, and it's going to be split kind of east to west. The pool that is in there, if you've been there, the pool, we're adapting the pool into the clubhouse. The clubhouse will have with it open activity center, offices, bathrooms, and an outside entrance for visiting doctor and nurse station that can help with home health and also the residents in the assisted living. That'll be inside the clubhouse. And that'll be retained ownership. The clubhouse portion will be retained by the HOA and the community that buys their units. The other side of the home will be converted into what the Board of Health calls a small AL facility, which is 20 beds or less. We've been massing studying the rooms and the rooms that are in existence in the home now to see how many rooms we can get in the home as a licensed assisted living, and we don't think we're going to hit 20. We will be sub 20. The code allows us to have 20 under a small license. That's what Beehive runs under. This is not a Beehive home residence. It is a Dignity Care residence, but it's under that same licensing. So AL2 licensing and care inside the home and the facility. But it'll be separate. They don't mingle. Does that make sense? So they're separated with firewalls and the separate ownership of the clubhouse portion and the AL portion. Hope that.
So, Mark, a question. So on the HOA there and on the business in the center, the people that live in the homes around it can use that, or they can use someone else. They would have the option either way.
Yeah, you mean so the HOA
as far as assisted help, nursing help, whatever, they can use what's there in the center by the HOA, or they can contract with somebody else.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't mandate health care inside your home. So home health, they can elect anybody that they'd want. If a resident in the home needs care, they can contract with the care provider in the AL, or they could outsource it to anybody that they wish to.
And so you've got some parking provided for the assisted living, is that correct, what I'm seeing?
Uh-huh.
Also, if in fact you were to set this up and begin business, and for whatever reason, the operation of the HOA, et cetera, the assisted living was not working, did not work, and went out of business or whatever, what would happen with that? Is there any mandates? What would happen with that facility in the center?
So remember, the facility, consider it as two facilities, will separate it with a firewall. It'll be completely, there's no access between the HOA side and the assisted.
But they're owned by the same group?
No, the HOA, remember the grounds, the pool, the grounds for the HOA is owned by the residents.
Okay.
And the AL will be owned by Dignity Care. So just like any Dignity Care or any campus like our one in North Orem, if it went out of business, I guess it could be sold or whatever. But it's separate title ownership on the AL side.
Okay. And then can you tell us about the road there on 200 East? That's coming out of the land area, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, part of our requirement is to finish that road and bring it down and dedicate it to the city, bring it down and around. It does not interfere with the park, and we miss the tennis courts. We think that the park across to the east is a great amenity for both our residents here and the access through and to from the community around our neighborhood around us.
Okay. Councilmember Sumner, do you have a question?
A couple of questions. Jason, have we done a traffic study on this, or is one required, or?
I think Paul did look at the traffic, and with the gated community and the increase or the addition of 200 East and finishing that street, he was satisfied with the requirements.
Okay.
For the traffic.
So it's they haven't done a separate traffic study. It's just a master plan, or what?
Yeah, I think it was just working with Paul to
Speaking of Paul,
Paul can address that a little better.
Yeah.
There you go.
Paul Goodrich, transportation engineer. Just kind of did one on our own. They have 40 units in there, the proposed 40 units for senior housing. We compared that to what could possibly done if it went to just a single family housing, and we assumed there would be 25 units. With single family housing, though, the trip generation rate is actually about 14 trips a day, at 17 leaving a unit, and 7 leaving and 7 coming back. For senior housing, the information that we were able to find is that's a whole lot less per unit. It probably would be closer to 5 as an average. So basically, with single-family housing, the full trip generation rate, daily rate for the full site would be about 350 vehicles a day, whereas just for the senior housing component, it would be around 200. But then if you add to that the assisted living facility, the extra 16 to 20 units or whatever that turns out to be, then that could kind of bring it out to be probably close to the same one way or the other. I think it's probably pretty close to being a wash for traffic generation. The street to the east is kind of a hybrid that we came up with between a local street and a sublocal street. On the west side, if this is approved, there would be red curb and no parking on that side, but there would be parking on the park side of the street. One other thing too about the kind of the traffic analysis is that again the streets that are proposed to connect east-west through the facility would be private streets, and they would be gated. So there's no public access, vehicle access east and west. However, staff would recommend that pedestrian access be allowed through there in case, let's say, somebody from the neighborhoods to the west wanted to be able to get to the park. They could walk on the sidewalks on the street and be able to, whether it's the park they wanted to get to or the school or just, neighboring residential areas, there would be pedestrian access through there. Whereas if there was a single-family housing project, to be able to get the lot yield, there's a possibility that those east-west streets would more than likely be public streets and would be open to public vehicle access. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Councilmember Seastrand.
In the traffic studies, just from an understanding, how in a facility like this where you'd have an increased number of visitors that attend, how does that factor into the transport?
Well, and that factored into the senior housing as kind of a Institute of Transportation Engineers does different studies for different kind of housing units, and So it is it is a lower rate than the rate that we have for single-family housing.
Even with,
Again, this is just using averages, and just because the averages for other, may not turn out to be apples to apples, but in my mind, there's going to be fairly close.
Same thing with the care facility in the middle. It's operating as a care facility. A 20-bed care facility from a traffic standpoint.
I think that the 20-bed care facility would take the senior housing project up to be probably more comparable to what if it was a single-family housing. I think one of the bigger things to me, again, is that with single-family housing, it would probably be an east-west public street to be able to get the lot yield. And for, R8 type communities, that's what we have. We've been discouraging private streets and typically require a public street for those kinds of things. So anyway, in my recommendation is that although there are traffic issues involved with any kind of development, to me it's pretty close to a wash, and my recommendation is it's more of a planning issue rather than a traffic issue. Something will probably eventually happen with the property, and the street next to the park, I think is probably a given that that's going to go through, but, whether or not the public road goes east and west is depending on what kind of use ends up on the property.
Do you see any emergency vehicle access issues with the traffic plan?
No, we don't. We had our fire marshal take a look at the plan, and he was fine with it.
Thank you.
Councilor McDonald.
Is the proposed road, Paul, wide enough to park on that road?
The proposed road, you talking about the private road?
Yes.
Okay. The private road that's going east-west is not wide enough. You'll see some of the parking spaces that are off of that. Those parking spaces are for visitor parking, and they're for the senior care facility.
So if I'm living in Building 10, happens to be the first one on the, whatever that is, the southeast side, no one can park in front of my building to see me. They could maybe pull into my driveway, but it looks like the driveways are just to get to the garage.
Yeah.
They'd have to park over in the common parking.
They can pull into your driveway, or they can park in one of those visitor parking.
So, and every unit has 2-car garage and 2 cars out in front of the driveway, minimum of 22 feet. So we'd have
Pizza guy would have to park over there and haul his pizza over.
or in the driveway.
Okay.
Park in the driveway.
Like it does in your
Fine dining at the McDonald home that evening. So
there you go.
thank you.
Councilmember Sumner.
questions on the,
No.
I just
Thank you,
had,
Paul.
I had a question. You're calling it the Dignity Care Center.
Yes.
That I tried to look on the internet, and I looked at your webpage, and there's really not any information on Dignity Care Center or facility. Can you give me a short overview of exactly what we're doing here?
But you want to know who Dignity Care is?
Well, what's your vision of this development? You got housing, and then you got care in the middle, and
right. This is just exactly what you said, Commissioner. These are for sale, gated community senior restricted housing. They own their own houses, and it's for sale. The care center itself is going to be managed by. It's owned by Dignity Care, managed by a licensed manager inside of a care center, just like you would a Beehive home or any other assisted living center. For instance, the one that we build up here on State Street, we're the owners, but we're not providing the care. We hire a manager, a licensed manager, to manage the care day to day. So that's what's happening in the AL facility.
so how many employees?
In a small facility, it's very limited as far as, it's very less restricted than our large care facility. That's why they have a small license. It's mandated and regulated by the Board of Health. And so how many care facilities? There's always a resident or a CNA on site 24/7, and then there's nurses on call. They come and do food. There's food preparation, cleaning, and other resources that come into the care center. But it's just exactly like, I hate to use the Beehive home name, but that's the model that this is patterned after.
And is there hospice care there?
No, it could be hospice home health could be had in anybody's home, so it could be in anybody's house in the community, but not cared for out of the AL.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lentz?
2 questions. First of all, can you talk about what you see as the broader benefit to the neighborhood or the community beyond just, we want to turn, obviously if you're doing development like this, you want to turn a profit and things like that, but talk about how you see this positively impacting the rest of the neighborhood and that part of the community. And then the second question is, well, actually, I'll let you address that one first, then I'll ask another one after that.
Well, there's very similar communities like this. One of them in my neighborhood, and I live in Lehigh, and there's one that a fellow by named Larry Lindstrom that built called Leisure Villas. It's very, very similar, attached fourplexes. I watched that intently because the folks that moved in there were active seniors, couples that were service-oriented and active and moving about. Soon thereafter, they needed, one or both needed care. And a large majority of the people in that facility today, in that little campus today in Lehigh, need care. And this is not unfamiliar to that, very similar to that facility there in Lehigh and others. There's one in Springville. There's many in our communities. That's what I see here. Now, how does it benefit the community? Residents like our ALs that we build and manage, our residents, are usually in bed by 9 o'clock, and they don't throw parties, and there's not lights, and I mean, we're dang good neighbors. The AL portion, they don't have any. We don't even allow vehicles, so the people in the assisted living facility they don't drive. I think it blesses the lives of seniors. To be honest with you, I mean, this is a place for people to come and own their own. They're tired of taking care of the landscaping, the garden on an acre, and they want to have a nice facility that they can go serve or do something else with their lives, and that's what this is.
Okay. And then the follow-up question was, as we've been getting phone calls and emails, one of the common themes that I heard from a few people was, I really like this concept and I like the idea of what they're trying to accomplish. My concern is just with the location where it's just this island right in the heart of this residential neighborhood. So just kind of, throwing out the location, if you had a blank slate and you could put this type of facility, what would you want to see differently if you could locate it somewhere else?
I wouldn't. To me, this is ideal for this use. I've watched these communities grow up in the middle of neighborhoods where they interact, and I mean these aren't plagued people. They're our parents, for heaven's sakes, and they interact with our children, and that's what this is. If truth be known, if I could, I'd buy one of these and live here in Orem. I think this is a blessing for the community.
Okay.
Question for you. This is a senior center. What age does that mean?
55 or above.
Okay.
Age restricted.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer.
So what are you selling these fourplexes for?
We've done a market study of several of them. We're being told they're going to range from 320 to 350.
Yeah, and the square footage?
1,700, and then if they do the bonus room, it was 16. Let's see. Excuse me. I think they're 1,650 to 1,800 with the bonus, with a 3-car or 3-bedroom.
Thank you.
Councilmember Summer.
Can you tell us about the HOA fees? What? The HOA fees will pay for the pool, right?
Yeah, pool maintenance, snow removal, landscape maintenance, and the clubhouse maintenance.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had an experience with an HOA, and they had a pool, and that was such high maintenance. The fees kept going up $20, $30 a year. And 55 and older, do they use that pool?
You'd be surprised. Yeah, yeah, you'd be surprised. And then the clubhouse and pool area is also reserved for families and parties and things and activities. The clubhouse area with the open room is used almost every day, and the pool as well. Surprisingly so. Especially this facility, this home has the pool that we're leaving in the clubhouse is under the roof, not exposed to the weather. It's more usable.
Do you know what your fees will be to start?
We're estimating at this point, so I hate hypothetical estimate, yeah. We think they're going to be 120, 130.
Okay, thank you.
And these are 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom?
2 bedrooms or 3 with 2 to 3. Yeah, two's a minimum, 3 if a little more money.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? Okay, yes, Steve.
Mayor, if I may just ask a question. At Planning Commission, it was indicated that the clubhouse building would be common area to be owned by the residents, and I think I heard something differently in your initial remarks. Has that changed then?
No, the clubhouse is owned by the 40 units of the facility.
Okay, so it will be leased or rented to Dignity Care, not owned?
No, remember, so there's 2 facilities. There'll be a fire separation wall. The AL is going to be retain ownership by us. The clubhouse is owned by the community.
Okay, and you haven't designated that separation on this contract?
We will on the subdivision plat. Yeah.
Okay, so part of it will be owned by the residents and part would be owned by Dignity Care. Yeah. That's the plan, okay.
The AL portion only.
Okay, so this is a public hearing. We'd like to open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to make a comment, please come forward, give us your name, and hold your comments to 3 minutes. The time's now open.
Hi, my name is Jeff Myers, and I was here at the Planning Commission. I heard the same thing. So my initial concerns were a lot around the HOA, and if the business failed, what that would mean for the HOA. I think that's an important distinction because I do think that was presented differently with the Planning Commission, but I think it's actually a better idea if it's owned separately than owned by the HOA.
I apologize if that was misunderstood. It was always our intent that the residents of the 40 units own the HOA, the clubhouse.
I may have misunderstood that. My other concern, I guess, is so I live to the west. That will pour right out into my driveway, and so my concern is the traffic. And I don't think 100 East could manage a lot more traffic. And so my concern is, 200 East possibly is a little bit wider. I don't know about 1800 South, but I guess my concern would be that we don't really know what traffic is going to be created by the commercial entity that's going to be there. It sounded like we're making our best guess. And for my house, and I really want to go into this with our best guess, and I know you have to do that at some point, but that concerns me that there's going to be a lot of traffic with the commercial entity that's in there. And I guess the other concern I would have would be with the commercial entity. If it does fail, I don't really understand what that's going to mean and for the neighborhood. And I imagine that would be some sort of, at some point they would have to come back to the city and ask for you to allow a different business to be in there so that it would be viable. I don't understand what that would mean. I guess the zone, from what I understand, the zone wouldn't allow that to happen, but I guess that's my concern, is that request would come down the road. And so thank you for your time and thank you for your
Okay, thank you.
Amy, and I just have some insight as to the 2 different projects. I don't know how SWANA was or is, but it was mentioned in one of the parking
studies.
Thank you. Yeah, they just said be aware. So in reaching out to them, I just wanted to make sure that you all know that it's not necessarily something that's elected. It's a group of people that have gotten together and a very good cause, but it's not necessarily the same cause as the UU interest. So I just want to make that clear differentiation that there's the house of apartments and then there's this 55 plus, and they're totally different in my mind and also in the minds of most of the people Swana group, that there's kind of a disconnect as far as supporting the UVU apartment complexes that are 5 stories high and having a community of 55 and plus. So I just wanted to make that point. And also, I just wanted to also say that I appreciate the planning that we just heard about. That was a great idea for the neighborhood. I appreciate those. But I keep hearing the same phrases over and over. They're the same phrases that we've heard since October. They're the phrases of commercial entity. They're the phrases of what if this fails? It's the same arguments that we had last time, the same arguments that we keep hearing. And they feel a little parroted, like I want a cracker. And the only reason why I say that is because I really feel like there's the phrases that are being said have already been answered. We've actually discussed a lot of these questions, and it's not a commercial, is it? I mean, didn't we decide that it's not a commercial entity? That's just, so I'm trying to clarify what we're saying, and that the things that are being presented are clear and not necessarily just the same phraseology that we're getting from the same group, I guess, because we have clarified a lot of the points that have been made. So anyway, hopefully they're new points that are being brought up and not the same phrases that have been already addressed. So that's all.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Sharon Mead. I live at 1953 South, 375 East, Orem. I am very much against this zoning change. I have children and grandchildren that live in this neighborhood around Cherry Hill School. We chose this area to live because it's a quiet neighborhood, and this zoning change does threaten that. I know the reality of that threat because of the assisted living facility that was recently built right across the street from my house. I know, regardless of the traffic study that says it's going to be okay, I know the traffic is increased. I know that visitors coming to visit the assisted living facility park wherever they feel like it. They block my driveway. They will block the neighbors of this facility. If they can't park right where they want, they just park wherever they want to. It's just, that's the way it is. The traffic is a threat to children in the area. My grandkids have, near misses. I have an autistic grandkid that lives with me, near misses with him. The traffic increase is serious. Yeah, I know this because of that facility. The quality of life will degrade. We want the people that live in this around Cherry Hill School live there because it's a quiet neighborhood. It's a good place to raise kids. Every one of these facilities, I mean, we have multiple facilities in that area already, and every one of those changes the dynamics of the neighborhood, and more and more and more, it's not for families anymore. It's for, she used the word commercial, but it sounds like it's more a revenue generator for the city as opposed to a neighborhood for families to live in. More and more of these facilities make it so I don't want my family to live there anymore. I want to move somewhere else. I want my kids and grandkids to be safe walking to the neighbor's house to play or walking to the park to play. These kind of developments threaten that. They can't be on their scooters or whatever. They can't. The traffic is just terrible. Please don't change the zoning to allow this. Please listen to your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ren Whiteman. I live at 373 East, 1800 South in the Cherry Hill neighborhood, and I'd personally like to thank each of the City Council members and the Mayor for your time, service, and attention to this proposed rezoning of the property at 202 East, 1800 South from an R8 zone to a PD zone. I've expressed to each of you in person, and I will state it again publicly, I strongly oppose this proposed rezoning. And this evening I ask that you each vote against it. The core principle of this proposal is zoning. The basic function and purpose of zoning is to divide a municipality into residential, commercial, and industrial districts or zones that should be separate from one another, with the use of property within each district being uniform. That's what's being proposed is to put a commercial entity, essentially an assisted living and pharmaceutical center, at the heart of the Cherry Hill neighborhood. And that would butt up against a beautiful park and elementary school that our children walk through and to daily. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Zoning allows and should protect residential zones to stay separate from proposals like this. When speaking with our mayor about this proposed rezoning, he mentioned that that there are several large estates like this one in Orem. He judiciously stated that if this rezoning is approved, then what's preventing the other large estates from following suit? It's a legitimate concern because, once again, it attacks the integrity of neighborhoods and, most importantly, the laws of zoning that are in place to protect neighborhoods. Over the last several months, over 250 residents of the Cherry Hill neighborhood have signed a petition stating they are against this proposed rezoning. As elected city officials, you are aware of the time and effort it takes to collect that number of signatures. Myself and many of my neighbors have sent emails to the City Council voicing opposition. I believe the data is clear and the resistance is strong. If you allow the rezoning to take place at said property, you will be attacking and depleting the heart of the Cherry Hill neighborhood. It will not bring families to the area. It will not allow the area to grow. It will encourage current families who live in Cherry Hill to move out. This will turn our area into a rented and transient neighborhood. Please do not allow for this to happen. Please do not allow for this rezoning to take place. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Crawford. I live at 187 East, 1825 South. My property borders the southeast corner of the existing property. I've lived in the area where I live slightly over 40 years, seen a lot of change in Orem, and I think that the proposal as given has more positive merits than negative. I moved to where I currently live from Burning Tree Acres, which was I'm not sure whether it's a PD zone or not. It is a HOA that governs the use of the property, and over time, that area has declined in upkeep and value, and I think that the way in which this property is being put forth and designed, there's a greater incentive to maintain the quality of the property and the landscaping and the maintenance of the property. I don't see traffic changing much if it was a residential area. It's certainly going to change from what it is right now because there's hardly any traffic at all going through the area. I think that as a way of adding a variety of residential options for older people to live in this area and take advantage of the services that are being provided, that's a great advantage for the proposal as is. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Scott Weaver. I live at 203 East, 1864 South. I'm honored to talk before the council. My friend Brent up there I went to school with. Over 2,000 years ago, in the city of Troy, they brought a Trojan horse, and they left it out in front, and then they left. And that's what we're going to have if we leave here. My mother taught at Cherry Hills Elementary for 16 years, and I've lived in that area all my life, and it's changed drastically. So I asked the city council and the mayor, please don't do this. This neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is David Scarda. I am currently building a house in the neighborhood. I'm building at 160 East, 1910 South. And I'm very excited about moving to this neighborhood. My grandparents lived in the Cherry Hill neighborhood. In fact, my grandmother just died a week and a half ago. And I have been looking forward to this opportunity for several years. In my work, I oftentimes make a lot of decisions regarding things that can be done that cannot be undone. And I think it's critical for the council to think about this in terms of doing something, making a decision that lets the cat out of the bag and has the potential of changing this neighborhood significantly for the foreseeable future. This is something that's hard to take back.
Thank you.
I'm Marvin Wiggins. I live at 324 East, 1730 South Orem. I'm a former chair of the Orem Cherry Hill neighborhood under Mayor Washburn. I've known many city council members for many years. Mayor, city council, this proposal is out of harmony with the low-density R8 zone of the Cherry Hill neighborhood. Mayor Brunst attended a SWONA meeting with Murray Law, Alan Parrish, and David Bush on March 24th, 2017. From the minutes of SWONA, Mayor Brunst stated that we shouldn't put planned development PD zones in the middle of our zones. It would be a bad precedent to convert large residential estates to PD zone. The Dignity Care proposal before the City Council is out of harmony with the residents of this area. Jerry Jones, the owner, is free to develop very nice single-family homes in harmony with the other homes surrounding this estate. Jerry Jones says the market will not support that kind of development in this area. I respectfully disagree with Jerry. There is currently $1 million plus home being built just south of this property at 140 East, 1910 South. If Jerry would do the same kind of development, it will encourage any redevelopment to do the same, rather than creating a domino effect for higher density. The neighbors, your constituents, who surround this area have established restricted covenants to preserve their single-family environment. Those restrictive covenants exist for Park Lane to the south and Burning Tree Acres to the east. The homes to the west and south are also single-family residences. Dignity Care is right in the middle of these high-quality homes. We feel that the development of Jerry's property should be in harmony with the rest of the neighborhood. Good zoning preserves property values. You can see it in Provo City. Drive through their single-family zones in Grandview, Oak Hills, Pleasant View, Rock Canyon, Indian Hills, and North Temple View, and you will find strong property values, high resale demand, family preservation zones, and no mixed uses or spot zoning. We ask, and I ask, the Orem City Council not to approve the proposed zone change for this property. Thank you, Mayor and City Council.
Thank you. Any others wishing to come forward?
My name is Eric Bingham. I live at 189 East, 1864 South. If you wouldn't mind going back to the community map itself, shows the neighborhoods, shows the schools. A little bit of history about myself. I reiterated this at the Planning Commission meeting, but I also would like to address some of the other things I'm hearing. I lived in the condominiums to the north of the community, or to Cherry Hill Park. That's where I bought my first home. My second home was 2 blocks south, directly across from Cherry Hill Elementary. I've since moved 2 blocks south of there on 1864 South, and so for the last 22 years, I've raised my family. We're at a phase now in my 50s where I'm considering what to do next. Part of the challenge that I have is my mother has recently moved in the neighborhood. She's 74 years old. We're trying to find a place for her to live. to make something like this available to an elderly community or to a neighborhood that is aged would be a tremendous benefit, primarily because the people who are in opposition to this are saying, we want to bring in young families. Well, guess what? Find that house that's available and affordable to these young families in that neighborhood. Please do something to do that. If Jerry were to develop this into something that allowed for the type of density that's being discussed as an R8 zone, that's 20 to 25 homes. In order for those to be built, you're looking at a price tag between $650,000 to $850,000 each. The reason why I know that is because as a developer myself, we looked at purchasing this ground to actually do that very thing. We couldn't do it. We couldn't make the numbers work and make it affordable that would be a price point and a target point for these people. A lot of the community that is being developed around us to the south, that is the price point. And you look at the families that are moving into those neighborhoods, they're not young children. These are second and third homes of people who have had their children leave. They're building large homes that these children can come back to, but they're not staying. These are people that are now affording homes that are much more expensive than what will be allowed in that area. The price point in there's 2 homes right directly north of Jerry's property that recently just sold for $380,000 and $340,000. Those homes sat on the market for 4 months to 6 months waiting for someone to come and buy them. So we talk about the ability of someone to come in and afford something. It doesn't exist in this neighborhood. What is happening here is someone like Brother Wiggins. I watch him walk daily down my street. I live on the main thoroughfare of that street. He walks that daily. And I see him. This is an opportunity for someone of that age that they could leave their home that is a multi-level home, get into a single-family living, have an opportunity to be cared for as they prepare for death. It's going to happen. That's going to happen. They could be prepared for that and then allow another family who's younger and make it affordable to live in. So I think it's a fantastic addition. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Pat Mossbacker, and my wife and I and our 6 children have lived in our current home on 200 East, next to the proposed development for 5 years, and in the neighborhood for 11. In the cul-de-sac behind us, Zach and Christy Miller and their 4 kids moved into their home, also bordering the property on the north, 3 years ago. They both work evenings, and with their permission, I speak on their behalf as well, and we have nothing to do with SWONA. In the code, if one person wants to make an island, in the middle of a cohesive 16 square block residential zone, they have a very heavy burden of proof as to how that promotes, as the code says, health, safety, and general welfare of the community, and how it implements the master plan. Now, if we were to take the map of the whole Orem map of zoning and say, let's point out obvious areas where it doesn't make sense to add density or commercial, whatever they say, it's a commercial entity. We would point out the middle of all of the cohesive residential areas. And that's not anti-growth or anti-anyone who would live in those multifamily areas. Everyone's welcome in Orem, and single-family residential zones still have a unique value. All of the 7 council members, we live in a residential zone. And regarding this, it's been argued that since there are multifamily and commercial zones within 3 or 4 blocks, our neighborhood's mixed, and so the project wouldn't be an island. But by that definition, almost every residential area in Orem would be fair game for a spot zone then, right in the middle. And if, for example, there's a large field right behind Tom McDonald's home that's almost exactly the same size as this property next to me. Now, if you apply the Cherry Hill reasoning to Palisade, the fact that it's only 3 blocks from 800 North means the property owner should be able to build a multifamily and commercial. So take this exact project, 10 large fourplexes, every 2 only 8 feet apart, the care center in the middle, put it right there. Take any other tasteful multifamily commercial hybrid you can imagine, whatever. Can we credibly argue that it wouldn't change the character of the neighborhood? Would those property owners all around it feel that their property rights were being respected with that development? Another example, in the 16 block area immediately east of Brent Sumner's home, there's a large farmer's field right in the middle of a residential ring of houses. Now, it's only a couple of blocks from the denser areas right on Orem Boulevard, but the neighborhood is cohesively residential. Would his neighbors feel that a spot zone right in the middle was fair to their property rights? And that there's the Bastion property that's just down from Mark Seastrand's home that's less than half a mile from this Cherry Hill project. It's going to have the same issues soon. What are we going to allow in that zone? And so if a property owner buys a land in a single family residential price and the master plan says it's being developed residential, their property rights are not being harmed. And if they're allowed to change the zone for reasons that boil down to personal preference, whether that's financial or whatever other reason, then their harm will be done to the property rights of everyone else who have purchased in good faith understanding of a residential zone, like me, the Millers, and one of the houses Eric's just mentioned, two down from me. It was a young family having their first kid, just bought it, just moved in on Saturday. So please leave it a residential zone.
Thank you. This young man, would you like to come forward and speak? You may want to pull the microphone down to you.
My name is Truman Vancott. I live at 1873 West, or South 45 West, and I think that this would be a great benefit. And I can assure you that the Bastion Mansion is not going to become a senior living center. But I would also like to say that I lived in North Orem for a while, and the neighborhood I lived in was majority seniors, and they're not road ragers, and they won't affect the community, and they're going to help look out for the kids in that community. But I just wanted to say that, and also that I think that they would really bless the lives of the people in their area, and that I think this is a great benefit.
Thank you for your willingness to speak.
Good evening, Council. I'm Denise Gibb. I live at 1864 South. Excuse me, I live on 1864 South at 172 East. I appreciate all the time you have spent to study this issue. As you understand, what is left in our Cherry Hill neighborhood is a 16-block radius from 1600 South to 2000 South, from 4th East to Main Street. This is the last pocket of mostly owner-occupied single-family residence in Cherry Hill. The R8 zone is applicable, and all over this neighborhood it's R8 zone. It is a viable and developmental zone in this area. Consider the fact that there are currently, throughout Orem, many R8 zones under construction and development. Also, there's 4 zones in this 4 developments in this neighborhood that are part of the R8 development. The most notable one is Legacy Ridge on the corner of 2000 South and Main Street, a 60-lot subdivision where there are currently only 11 lots left. 14 homes are under construction. The price range of these homes are $500,000 up to $1.5 million. I believe that this proves strongly that this property could be developed and would bring people to Cherry Hill neighborhood. Dr. Scarta's Homes is directly behind me, a $1.5 million home that will be completed in July. He's a cardiac surgeon, a neonatal cardiac surgeon that's going to work at Utah Valley Regional Medical Center. This is the quality of people that would be moving in to the Cherry Hill neighborhood. The PD zone by creation establishes a spot zone or an island of zoning in the middle of this R8 zone. It allows for higher density than what the low density R8 zone is. We've heard the existing home described as a clubhouse, a community center, a recreational facility, but I argue with you, it is a commercial enterprise in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It is open to the public. Even the city staff in one of their outlines called it commercial in nature. There are 16 facilities in Orem that provide services to our seniors. All of these facilities are located on major or secondary roads. None are located in the heart of a neighborhood. None are next to an elementary school. The continuation of private streets and gates would reduce street connectivity and the effective flow of traffic versus what would likely to be provided if the subject property were developed as an R8 zone. In defense of my neighborhood, it's Pinewood Derby night tonight. But I am here, and there are also, I've counted noses, about 35 other residents, and we're going to spare you their speaking, that are opposed to this development. Please help us not cause a fragmentation in Cherry Hill. Help us remain a cohesive neighborhood under an R8 zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to come forward?
I'm Jerry Jones, and I own the property. I appreciate the opportunity of visiting with you. This has been portrayed as a lot of different things, but I've lived in the area and that property for about 18 years, and it is a fenced and walled and gated property. We have received offers from drug treatment centers, from troubled youth centers, from homes for recovering addicts. We wouldn't consider this at all for any of our neighbors. But when this came along, this was the perfect answer. The home there is a $2 million home. And the economics of tearing the home down and turning it into building lots by the time you subdivide and you put in all of the improvements and you build the home, yes, you're going to have a $600,000. The home that the doctor built is the only home in the area that's any price like that. When you go to Legacy Ridge, they're all homes that are of the same type. But in our area, we have homes that are from 50 to 20 years old. In fact, if you go a little further east, you're in Morningside Heights, and they were built during the Second World War for Geneva Steel people. That area would not accommodate people buying houses. Now, I know the ones that have been here speaking about wanting to make homes in there, they'd like to have young families come in there, and that would be really terrific. But no young family could afford to buy the house there, and people who would buy higher priced homes wouldn't buy them in the area. So the traffic, I don't think, would be any more than what it is right now if you had single homes in there, because of the number of people that would live in the individual homes. I think that this is a perfect use of the property because people are buying their own homes. These are 55 and plus that are buying their own homes. It isn't like they're renting or they're, just going to be there for a few months. They're actually buying their own home and making an investment in the area. And I think they can add an awful lot to the area. And I don't think it's a threat to anyone that there's going to be people that are mature people that are going to be there. And it isn't mainly a commercial development. It is basically people buying their own units and living there, hopefully, until they die. So I think that this has been portrayed a little bit inaccurately in terms of what the development is actually going to be. And we'd love to make single-family homes in there, but economically, you just can't do it when you tear down a $2 million home in order to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, seeing that there is no one else, we'll go ahead and close the public portion of this meeting, public hearing portion of this meeting. Bring it back to the council. Any comments from the council? Councilmember Lentz.
Jason, a question real quick. The R5 zone that's just a little bit to the west and slightly north of there, remind me again, was that the accessory apartment where it had been in place for years and they just wanted to come into compliance, if I'm remembering that address correctly? I think that was probably about a year ago.
It's close to there. I'm not sure if it's that exact one.
I'm just trying to, as we've been talking about, making a zoning island, I'm trying to understand. We have some very small zoning islands. I'm just wondering if that was a one-off case because somebody, maybe something was in place years before and they just wanted to come into compliance with city code.
Typically, a residential zone itself is not an island. I mean, if it's a residential use and it's a residential zone, even though we have R6, R75, they're all residential zones, and so they're not an island.
As far as somebody mentioned pharmaceutical service there. Can you speak to that, Mark? We
don't offer any pharmaceutical services. People if they're prescribed medications, they'll have to get their medications from where everybody gets their own medications.
Okay. So you won't have like an inventory of pharmaceutical products there?
Not at all.
Okay. So Steve, this might be a question for you. If someone wanted to meet with a doctor that didn't live at this property, but they wanted to meet with one of the doctors that was there on site, is there anything, even if that's not currently their intent, is there anything that would prevent them in city code from meeting with the doctor there as, kind of an outpatient service type thing.
Yeah, that's not one of the permitted uses. That would be a medical office use.
Okay.
So that's not the kind of thing that would be permitted. However, if somebody from outside anywhere, wanted to come in and be a resident of an assisted living facility, they of course could do that.
Okay, thank you. I might have some more questions, but I'm good for now.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the council? Councilmember Seastrom?
Sure, thank you. So I was curious about some of the properties you had mentioned that are similar in nature to what you're looking at. And I went on to, was it Leisure Villas was the one that you had mentioned?
It's one of the providers, yes.
And I found that they had 3 different properties associated with their brand. One of them was in Anthem Park Boulevard area out in Stone Village. That's in Harriman? Is that one of them?
I'm not familiar with any of those, no.
Okay.
I'm just familiar that...
Unique characteristic of that one is that it's bordered on one side by a high school with track and field and tennis courts, and to the south of it is with the junior high school, and it looks like they're developing some commercial zone on the other side of it. So I was trying to see if these fit really well with...
The one I referred to is in Lehigh, right in the center of a residential neighborhood. That's the one I'm familiar with.
So that's the one right on Main Street?
No, it's...
the Leisure Villas, Inc., it's on
where's it at?
1940 West Main Street.
1200 East, 500 North.
Okay.
In Lehigh.
I didn't see that under the brand you'd referenced.
It may have...
The one that shows here, which looks very similar to it, is right on Main Street in Lehigh. And across the street are some commercial developments. There are some homes around it on the outer side, but I was trying to look to see if it fits right in the middle as opposed to, typically the higher densities, you see them fitting along streets that have higher traffic concerns, the state streets, the 800 Norths, those types of areas. And that's, that's one of the thoughts that I'm considering or thinking about is from a standpoint of density and where do we typically see that? Within the center of neighborhoods, within these types of neighborhood settings, we typically do see that's the ideal spot for single-family residential housing. And that as you get closer to the higher traffic streets, to the busier areas, is where you typically see the PDs or the PRD zones and or transition zones into commercial type properties that would be appropriate on the very heavily trafficked streets. So that's one of my concerns is it seems pretty unusual to me to have this type of development right in the middle of a regular R8 residential zone as opposed to on a fairly busy street where single-family homes wouldn't be typically considered a logical or reasonable aspect. And it sounded like the discussion was that it could be developed as an R8 property in this area. That there's nothing that says it couldn't be developed. It's just the nature of the zone with the R8 would be typically bringing in more expensive homes and therefore configurations similar to what's just down the street in the Legacy Parkway. Is that?
I can't speak to how the residential subdivision would fit here and how it would financially impact it. I can speak to the exposure I have to the senior communities that we've done in residential neighborhoods. We would prefer not to have our seniors in a commercial zone. We'd like them in our residential zone. Mm-hmm.
And I will say there have been a number of senior communities, twin home facilities that have been wonderful additions to neighborhoods that from that standpoint have been very favorable from the senior facilities that are available for that type of community. I've seen those have a very positive, powerful. The question for me is this the right location for one of those? Sure. That's where I'm struggling.
The uniqueness of it is interesting too, as you make that consideration. I understand what you're struggling with. The uniqueness of this gated community, the impact on the neighbors, is, in my opinion, and that's, I guess you need to have your own opinion, but in my opinion, it adds value. The homes in there aren't low-income housing. They're nice, beautiful homes, and owned by the residents and gated.
Perhaps it's the fourplex aspect of it, maybe that perhaps that there is, even though it may not be zoned commercial property, there are commercial activities going on within the zone with the the senior facility.
I take, I don't know, reservation to the commercial atmosphere.
Are they doing it profitability?
Are Beehive homes commercial?
They seem to be.
Okay.
I mean, people are paying to live there as part of it. It's not owned by an individual. It's if I rent an apartment.
Sure. I guess under that definition, it would be a commercial use. In my definition, it's a care for a resident.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? I'd like to just make a couple of comments. I think the facility that you're proposing is a beautiful facility, and I think it definitely meets a need. I think the question here is, should we make a zoning change or not, and is there a reason to do that? As I've gone back to the written word of the code, if I may, it states here under Chapter 22-1-2, the purpose and intent. The purposes of the zoning ordinance of the City of Orem, Utah are to promote the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community, and to implement the adopted master plan for the orderly and controlled growth of the city. Then further down, if you get to 22-6, -2, item C, the R8 zone, it states the R8 zone is established to promote low-density residential uses with a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet per lot, and to allow other selected uses which are compatible with the character of the zone. The Cherry Hill neighborhood is a wonderful neighborhood. It's one of our mainstay neighborhoods. It's been there for many years. I attended the reopening of the Cherry Hill School. That's been a beautiful facility that the Alpine School District's worked hard on. I've spent time in the Cherry Hill Park with friends and associates and family. I love the park. I love the area. It's a beautiful area. My feeling is that there is not a compelling reason to change this zone from the zone that it is, from an R8 zone. I believe that the R8 zone is there and meant to protect a beautiful, wonderful neighborhood where families can raise their children and where they can have a substantial, good life and move forward. So those are my thoughts. Councilmember Lentz, did you have some further thoughts?
Yeah, just to add to that, and I'd say I'm in agreement with that I actually love the idea of what you're proposing as far as the concept and to have that service available to our seniors here in Orem. I'd love to see a facility like this. I'm just not necessarily convinced that this location is the best place to put that. And I'd love to see another proposal where it's not right in the heart of a very low-density residential neighborhood like this. And I just wanted to comment again, and I've already spoken to many of you about this, but just to commend both sides of, whether you're for or against this issue. I've been thoroughly impressed with the way that everybody's been approaching this from a constructive standpoint, and you're disagreeing without being disagreeable. You're not attacking people. You're focused on the issues, what's best for the neighborhood, what's best for the property owners, both this property and the neighboring properties there. So I really appreciate that as an elected official, having people that love their neighborhood, care about the people that they live with and associate with. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your good comments, Sam. We'll go to Councilmember Sumner.
If this doesn't pass, do you have a backup plan? I mean, this is a beautiful piece of property, and I like the concept as well. Like one of the residents said, I grew up on the other side of town, and I'm very familiar with Cherry Hill, and it's a nice area, and it has been for years and years, and will continue to be. But I like your idea, the 55 and older, but I'm struggling with the commercial use of it, and some people don't call this, but I call it spot zoning, and I try to stay away from that if I can. So I'd like to see another use for it if possible.
Any other comments from the council? Okay, I would like to make a motion.
I have one question.
Yes.
Just from a curiosity standpoint, Jason, why was this not a PRD, and why did it come as a PD?
Because of the existing home. It was a very unique piece, and the only way to have this come forward was to have it as a PD. The PRD doesn't allow existing homes to be part of a PRD.
So the PRD would have been, they would have need to
have to tear it out.
Take out the home. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
If there's no further comments, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion. I'd like to move that the City Council deny amending Article 22-11 of the Orem City Code by enacting Section 22-11-61, PD 48 zone, deny amending the appendix of the Orem City Code by enacting Appendix RR, and deny amending Section 22-5-3A and the zoning map of the Orem City Code by changing the zone at approximately 1785 South, 100 East from the R8 zone to the PD 48 zone. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember McDonald, we'll go to you first. So you'd vote aye.
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 Okay, so this was denied. Thank you very much. We'll now go ahead and move on to item number 20, which is a public hearing. Signs on the University Parkway and State Street. This is an ordinance amending portions of Section 14-3-3 of the Orem City Code pertaining to monumental signs and freestanding signs along the University Parkway and State Street corridors. Jason Bench, we'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is in two parts. I'm going to talk about first the University Parkway proposal and then talk about State Street. As you're familiar with University Parkway and the improvements with the Orem Provo improvement project, the BRT, we looked at the ability for property owners to have signage along this parkway. It's broken up into 3 sign zones, C, A, and B. What we're proposing is a corridor amendment to allow those that have frontage on the corridor to have some additional monument signs. Just by way, this is the current configuration. You can see an example of the Lowe's property with their proposed sign. This would be the Lowe's existing sign if, when the BRT's project comes in and the trees are planted, the shrubs are planted, this is what their sign would look like. So as we looked at the options, we thought that it would be best if the city came up with a proposal to allow them to have some other type of option to get the advertising that they would need. This is the current requirement, a 6 foot high, 36 square foot sign, which is currently allowed anywhere in any of the sign zones. But as you can see, it's probably not big enough. This is the proposal that we currently allow anywhere, that if you have a multi-tenant facility, you can have an 8 foot by 50 square foot sign. We are proposing that this be the permitted use on the corridor, so that any tenant, whether it's a single use or multi-tenant use, could have this as the standard monument sign. That would be required to be 2 feet back of the sidewalk, so it would bring the sign up closer, a lower profile that would bring visibility to the business. In addition to that, we were looking at if they choose to relocate their pole sign. Right now in the sign zone C, they're required to they can have a maximum height of 40-foot pole sign, but it has to be equal to that height. So the Hobby Lobby property, for example, has a 40-foot pole sign, but it's actually sitting in the middle of their property because of that setback requirement. If you have a 40-foot pole sign in this location with the trees, it's probably going to be hidden. So we propose that we add a 12-foot by 90 square foot monument sign and allow that to be a lower profile, closer to the street, to give the ability for these tenants to be able to advertise on their for their properties. This is just kind of a typical, which we'll review coming forward to you on May 23rd as far as the parkway landscaping requirements. This is just the site plans of what the landscaping will look like. So it's pretty significant because we're reducing the amount of the width of 20 feet to 25 feet now to 10 feet. The amount of landscaping is increased in a short amount of space, and so the visibility is going to be reduced, and so that's why we're looking at this type of lower profile. So just to reiterate, on University Parkway, we're going to increase or propose that the council allow an 8 by 50 square foot monument sign as a permitted use on anywhere along the corridor, single tenant or more. If they choose to substitute the pole sign that's allowed on that property for a monument sign, then they would be able to have the larger sign, the 12 foot by 90 square feet. If they choose to keep the pole sign, then they would not be allowed to have that. In addition to that, we would require the monument signs, like the pole signs, currently are required to have a 100-foot separation for visibility and things. They would still need to meet the clear vision triangle, so they're not going to be able to be located right on an axis. They would still have to meet those requirements. In addition to that, we were proposing that the base itself be required to have brick, stone, or rock as part of the base, so that we have a standard, whether that's on State Street or University Parkway, so we have some standard of design. Any questions that I can address on the university part?
So the sign height is above the 12 inches of the base?
So the overall height would be overall the base.
Okay.
The square
Including
foot of the sign would not include the base.
Overall height would include the base?
Yes.
Okay. And how many signs are they allowed to have?
So whatever they're allowed to have as far as the number of pole signs. So the pole signs are based on the amount of frontage that you have.
Right. So that would not change?
That would not change.
Okay.
So if someone were allowed to have 2 pole signs, they could, in fact, take those pole signs and convert them to these larger monument signs if they chose to.
Or they could have a pole sign and a monument sign?
The monument sign that's 8 feet by 50. Or, yeah, they could have one of each. Sure.
Right. Okay. Any questions by the council? Councilor Lentz?
Just to confirm, nobody's going to be forced to change that. So if they'd be grandfathered in essentially if they want to keep their signs as they are.
There would be no grandfathering. If they chose to keep the sign, then they could keep the sign.
Okay.
This is an option if they chose, instead of having a 40-foot setback for their pole sign, they wanted 2 feet and have a little larger monument sign next to the street to take advantage of proximity to cars, then they could do that in lieu of the pole sign.
And in the survey that you'd referenced in the agenda here, that survey also talked about wall signs and blade signs. Are those addressed at all by this proposal, or is this just focused on sign or pole signs and monument signs?
Yeah, so each of those signs are allowed, but typically those buildings on the parkway are set back a great distance. So blade signs typically aren't going to be effective for properties that are set back 100 feet or whatever from the parkway. So the monument signs are what's going to be, in our opinion, effective for advertising, the traffic that's going down the freeway.
I am just wondering, as we start to see that area develop a little bit more with transit-oriented development and more walkable spaces, I do wonder if the blade signs will start to play a little bit more of a role in that. I mean, probably not their primary sign, but there might be some that have that as one component of it.
Well, and we're seeing that, and Christian will get to that when we talk about the State Street design standards. That is something that we're promoting, is with the buildings now being required to be closer, blade signs, wall signs, monument signs are going to be a little more effective for the traveling public, whereas pole signs may not be as effective. The building itself is going to act as the sign, so the blade signs will just reiterate that or add to that.
Okay.
So a question on this survey, it says a total of 24 residents answered the question. So these were residents and not business owners?
So this was at our neighborhood meeting that we had at the Sarah.
Okay.
We invited 2,500 people to come. We had about 100 people. This survey was taken, if you had a smartphone, we basically had a that you could actually, but 24 opted to take the survey.
So you're not sure if they were really residents or business owners? They could
It was a mix.
Either one?
Yeah, there was a mix of residents and business owners there.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Spencer.
So Jason, it says signs on University and State Street. So can you clarify that? It's just...
So may have missed. So I'm going to talk about both. This specific standards would be for the parkway only. Which one are we talking about? Where are you looking? The agenda summary includes both, but I'm talking specifically for Parkway right now, and then I'll talk about State Street separately. So, yeah, the motion would include both, but...
And you've got something on State Street then?
Yes, sir.
Oh, is it?
I apologize. The ordinance is inclusive to all, but I'm separating them out because they're a little bit different as what we're proposing.
This is both. First he's doing University Park Street, and then he's going to go into State.
Does that answer your question?
So,
yeah, so it's
if I'm following it, your ordinance reads along University Parkway and State Street corridors in Ordinance 20.
Yes, so we're talking about both. So now I'm going to go to State Street if there's no more
Jumped
questions.
ahead, sorry.
And yeah, I'll address it all and clarify all.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the council? Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up to...
So this is all one item. If I can go to State Street and then we'll...
Sure, that's fine.
That's okay. So as part of the State Street design standards, we also looked at the sign zones. We also had an applicant, the Wiener Schnitzel, that's on 300 North here on State Street, came in and requested that they have a larger monument sign. They want to actually get rid of their pole sign. We did not have a provision for them to do that, although we would encourage people to get rid of pole signs in lieu of monument signs. And so they actually asked us to come up with a language, and they worked with us on their request to make sure that it fit with them as well. So what we are proposing is, right now, as we talked about, the 6 foot high by 36 square feet is the standard monument sign that is allowed in any of the sign zones. We want to keep the fact that they could have a 8 foot by 50 square feet if they have a multi-tenant facility, which is a current ordinance. But then on the State Street corridor, we'd like to encourage a 10 foot by 75 square feet if they then substitute their pole sign allowed for the monument sign. So similar on the Parkway. The Parkway has a lot larger pieces of property. They're larger developments, have larger frontage. The 12 foot by 90 square feet just didn't fit on the State Street side, so we went to the 10 foot by 75 square foot. If we look, and this is something that Christian will talk about on our next item, but as we focused on the separated sidewalk issue with the 15-foot planter strip, 8-foot sidewalk, and then the 10-foot setback, there you can see on the bottom picture the blade sign and the monument sign, which is more effective, in our opinion, as you have the traveling public. The difference in this is that we would actually allow that monument sign to be in that 15-foot planter strip, 8-foot setback from the back of curb. So it actually gets it even closer to the street and in lieu of having the pole sign, as you see up and down State Street. What we're also requesting is that the pole signs actually, like on the Parkway, be equal to the height of that pole sign. Right now, a pole sign can actually be right on the property line. So the leading edge of any pole sign, as you'll see up and down State Street, is right on the property line. So we get these 35-foot tall signs right on the property line, and that's what we're trying to discourage. So with that, if they still want to have a monument sign, we're not saying that they cannot have a monument sign. We're still allowing that in the text. The only difference we're changing is the fact that the setback now would be equal to that height of that pole sign, but actually then taking that monument sign and getting it closer, so exchanging some of the rights that they have with this pole sign now would be allowed.
So you're really discouraging the use of pole signs by doing this?
Well, we're kind of matching what is allowed on the Parkway right now. So we're not trying to do something that's not already part of the sign zone Z, or C, for example, but trying to be consistent with the pole sign requirements, but then at the same time encouraging these monument signs to be close.
Right, I really see you moving the other way. Councilman McDonald has a question.
2 questions, Jason. One, are current signs grandfathered in?
Current signs would be grandfathered, yes.
And second, is there anything about the safety for drivers with these monument signs versus a pole sign? Have studies been done? Paul might know this answer. I mean, if a car hits a monument sign, are they more likely to hit it because it's close to the road? Do we have a safety hazard of any sort? And Paul's walking up to rescue you, perhaps, from that question.
I'll let Paul address that if you want.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things about the location of these signs, they need to be on the downstream side of the driveway, if you will, so that it doesn't cause a sight distance problem. The other thing that you can see is it's kind of set back closer to the sidewalk than it would be to the curb. Also, there's that buffer between the traffic lane and the sign itself. So whether, yeah. Of course, there are errant vehicles sometimes that, and someday is going to take one of those signs out. But one of the things that we really like about this plan is that we're getting the pedestrians out of the area. I think we'd rather have them, I don't know if I want to go on record saying this, but I think we'd rather have them hit a sign than a pedestrian.
You can go on record. That's a safety.
Okay, that's a safety thing.
But you don't know of other cities who have either more or less accident issues with monuments versus poles. I don't know if studies done on
I
that.
haven't heard any studies concerning that, but I know working in Sandy City for several years before I came here to work, that's all we had in that city was monument signs. And we didn't see that many problems.
Thank you for your help.
I know in Santaquin, and I know that's not a large city, but they have a lot of monument signs along their main street, and it looks really nice.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, what?
You're fine. And talking with the sign representative for the Wiener Schnitzel, that seems to be a trend nationally, that there are a lot of retail companies are now moving towards the monument signs. If you think about how you find, if you go to a different city that you're not familiar with, how you find your way around, you typically get on your cell phone, your Google Maps, and you wayfind to that, and then you look at the small monument sign and say, okay, I've arrived. You don't typically look for the 35-foot sign as you drive down the freeway that you're not familiar with. You typically use your smartphone, and that's what the way the future is going. And so these monument signs are going to act more of a destination. Okay, I've arrived at this, where the majority of people are using other ways to find it other than the large pole signs. At least that's our opinion.
And that's a good point. Thank you. Councilmember Sumner.
As development takes place on State Street, won't the sidewalks be zigging and zagging? I mean, they won't all be this.
They won't be the same. It's going to be developer driven. It's going to be based on redevelopment, and so there will be, and like the Parkway, for example, that's all going to be done with this project. State Street is not going to be that way, but eventually,
so you'll have
30 years.
This, and then you'll have to hop over to the. Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's unless we come
So
with a big pot of.
we actually already have that. For example, in front of Midtown, you have some buffering on the street, and then you go back to the sidewalk. So we have parts right now in State that way.
We have part. There's some buildings that are going to be too close to the street. Some older buildings built in the 50s, 40s, 50s that obviously will have to be torn down for this to work. I mean, so we have some that are just not going to work. It's going to take the redevelopment. The city's not going to go forward to do that. It's going to take redevelopment. It's going to take 20, 30 years to get this done, but we do have to have a starting point.
You have to have a vision of where you want to go.
And this is part of that vision.
You do it incrementally.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it'll be a good skateboard challenge.
Yeah, that's true.
Councilmember Lentz.
So there's a fine dining establishment across the street with golden arches that is in the process of redeveloping that property. Did they get in? So if this was enacted today, they would not be subject to this?
They would not. Unfortunately, they beat that application.
Just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Any other comments from the council? This is a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone who'd like to make a comment, please come forward and hold your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name. Seeing that no one is coming forward, we'll close that portion of our public hearing. Bring it back to the council. Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilmember Seastrand? Okay. So I'm open for a motion on this.
I can do that.
Okay.
I move that we, by ordinance, amend section 22-2-1, definition, 22-8-5, C2 zone, 22-8-7, C3 zone, 22-8-8 zone development standard.
So, question. Aren't we doing the one before? We should be doing
20.
Oh, did I scroll down to?
Yeah, you're on the next one.
Sorry, my
So
mistake.
if you go to the top of the
Strike
page,
that from the record.
Should add paper.
if you go to the top, I can make the motion if.
You can.
Oh, I've got it here.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I move that we amend by ordinance portions of section 14-3-3 of the Orem City Code pertaining to monument and freestanding sign requirements along the University Parkway and State Street corridors.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We'll start with Councilmember Seastrand.
Aye.
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 Okay, the ordinance passes. Thank you, Jason. We'll now move on to item number 21, which is a public hearing on design standards for State Street. This is an ordinance amending sections 22-2-1, 22-8-5, 22-8-7, 22-8-8, 22-8-9, 22-11-2, Appendix U and Appendix SS of the Orem City Code pertaining to State Street design standards. And we'll turn the time over to Jason and Christian.
Thank you. So just really brief before Christian starts, we've spent quite a bit of time trying to facilitate how we can implement the State Street Master Plan. This is our first step along with the signs that we just approved. It's taken some time. Christian has spearheaded this along with Steve Earle from our legal department. And one of these days we are going to convert him to be a planner. I'm just throwing that out there. But we spent a lot of time to making this happen. And so this is the first step. We'll be back before you again with other steps to implement this State Street Master Plan over time. It's a long process, but we appreciate your willingness to hear us out. And so I'll turn the time to Christian.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Mayor and council members, thank you for your time. I know it's a long evening, so I really appreciate you taking the time to take a look at this proposed update. What this is, as Jason mentioned, this is our beginning steps of implementation of the State Street Corridor Master Plan, which was completed in 2015. As we know, State Street is our economic core of the city, arguably the most important street of our entire city. And so we've already invested a lot in State Street, in studying it and in planning for its future. And one of the goals outlined in the State Street Corridor Master Plan was to enhance the open space system to encourage walkability, community gathering, healthy living, and active storefronts, and to improve the aesthetic appearance of the corridor. The proposed ordinance update we have before you tonight works to implement this goal. And as Jason mentioned, this is going to be incremental. This works towards that goal, and we will be back with more updates in the future. The map you see on the right, this is highlighting the zones that this would affect, narrowed down to within 500 feet of the State Street corridor right-of-way line. So this impacts the C2, C3, and PD zones along State Street.
A question, and maybe Jason, I don't know, or Christian, either one, but can you differentiate the difference between a regional commercial and a general commercial?
Regional commercial, which is the C3, was designed when Smith's and the Pinehurst development was developed. The C2 zone was kind of a general commercial. There wasn't nothing that separated the residential, and so the C3 was developed to have a separate buffer that we typically didn't have in the C2. They called it regional commercial, but it was basically designed to fit into proximity to residential.
Okay, thank you.
It also has a separate height requirement within proximity to neighboring residential zones.
Sure.
That the height is limited to 35 feet. So just to kind of give an overview, what these updates to the zoning ordinance will do. Like was mentioned, we will be introducing what is called buffered sidewalks or protected sidewalks with a 15-foot landscaped park strip with trees that are strategically placed for any future expansion needed on State Street. So if State Street needed to expand, only half of that park strip would be taken out and our trees would remain, and so they would be given the opportunity to fully mature. The protected sidewalks will provide added safety with that barrier between pedestrians and traffic to encourage more pedestrian activity. I've personally tried to walk State Street a number of times. It was not the most enjoyable experience. There is nothing between you and traffic. And even if there haven't been too many recorded pedestrian auto accidents, luckily, the perception of safety is an important thing. And so what this will do is this will provide that buffer in between pedestrians and traffic. We've worked in incentives to create more spaces open to the public. This can include dining areas, plazas, little pocket green spaces that add to create a downtown experience. We see this as our method is to encourage this, not necessarily mandate it. And so we've worked in some bonuses and incentives to developers should they provide this type of amenity. One of the bigger changes, the buildings, again, I want to reiterate this. This is all development driven. So when a property is ready to redevelop, that is when this update would kick in. But the buildings would be located closer to State Street with customer accesses facing and addressing the street. So in effect, you could have someone park once near a business, and then with that urban wall of neighboring businesses, they could walk and visit many different venues. This also aims to create a consistent look and feel with improvements in aesthetics. We've narrowed down a list of tree species for each of the districts and the areas in between districts. So as you walk or drive along the State Street corridor, you'll be able to recognize that as you transition into those districts by the tree species. Now, what will this not... Go ahead.
You could go back to that for just a second. So your last point, you're trying to create a consistent look and feel with significant improvements. Trees as placemaking features, landscaping, et cetera, buffering zones. I really feel like that's what State Street's been missing for years. It's just basically a concrete jungle with no planning. And that would be a great improvement, I think.
Yep.
So.
Thank you. So to highlight once again what this will not do, property owners on State Street will not be required to relocate any existing buildings or signs unless they are redeveloping more than 15% of their building. Currently, the ordinance states anything above 10% would require your site to be brought up to current standards. And so this actually adds a little bit of flexibility since the movement of an entire building is quite an endeavor. And this is, again, development driven. So there will be portions of State Street where the buildings will be brought up.
And a question, when you're redeveloping a building, are we talking inside, are we talking outside, are we talking both? I'm aware of a building not far from the Sarah Pool that they've redeveloped the inside but have not changed the outside other than some paint.
Yeah.
So just
any remodel, any facing of the building, new skin, anything that would not count towards this 15%. It's only adding to the square footage of the building.
Okay. But it's not redeveloping the inside of the building.
So footprint could be footprint and second story. I mean, if that adds up to the 15%, then that.
Sure.
But just redoing the perimeter of the building, adding a new facade, repaint, adding a new interior wall would not flip them into this requirement.
So you could basically gut the building and redo it.
You could. Yep.
It's called a refresh, not a redevelopment.
We'd encourage you not to gut the whole building.
Thank you for a refresh comment there.
Just thought I'd throw that.
Also, this will not cause the landowner to lose any of their property. In fact, because we are reducing the setback requirements, every parcel actually gains a little bit of usable land along the State Street corridor where they have that frontage. Any allowed commercial uses, so permitted uses, that doesn't change with this update. We haven't covered that here. And parking requirements, that remains untouched as well. And again, they're not required to provide public spaces, those types of amenities, but we are building in some incentives should they choose to do so.
Mayor, may I ask?
Yeah.
What kind of incentives are we offering, or is that yet to be determined?
That's coming up.
Oh, stay tuned. Thank you.
If I can just make just one quick comment to Mr. Sumner's point. I think we're hopefully with some of these changes, I mean, yes, a developer could gut the building and redo the shell, but we're hoping that they catch the vision that perhaps maybe redevelopment is more appropriate and work to make those changes. But we're not saying, you can't do that. If you choose to do that, we're more than willing to work with them. But we're hoping that they catch the vision that we're looking for State Street.
So redevelopment would look better than gut?
In our opinion, yes.
So the process of working on this ordinance update, of course, is very important since there are so many important businesses that are for Orem along this corridor that we solicit their feedback. And so we've used as many different mediums as possible, including comment cards at our neighborhood meetings. We've held public meetings. We've sent out over 4,000 postcards in the mail. We've utilized social media and Facebook. I've answered dozens of phone calls and emails concerning this update. And then we've launched the new Orem Forum, which is our online community engagement venue for any important planning-related issues that come up from development services, but we're working to also expand this to other departments as well. We post a topic every couple weeks, and then anyone who wants to within the city can log in and share their feedback with us. And so at that neighborhood meeting at the Sarah Center, we asked with that digital poll, and everyone had their smartphones out, and we asked them what they knew about the Orem Forum, since this is something, it's still less than 2 months old, and we're rolling it out and trying to find out how effective it's been so far. And a lot of them hadn't heard of it yet, and a few of them had registered and already participated. So we're working on getting the word out there, and as a planning team, we want to make sure that this is going to be a tool that we use to reach people who don't necessarily have the time or will to come to public meetings. And so the Orem Forum is a great way to reach people and get their feedback. So the zoning text itself covers a number of things. We've revised the purpose statements for the C2, C3, and PD zones, just to give a little more clarification of what they're all about. We've changed the building setbacks and the heights along the State Street corridor. I can answer any questions about that too. I'll show you in a graphic in just a second. The required planter strips along State Street and side streets, that buffered sidewalk, that's what this refers to. We've built in not only incentives, but also some exceptions for those small 15% renovation projects and public spaces. And Jason already mentioned the changes in sign regulations, and then other landscaping requirements, which refers to those tree species. And I've shared a few of these images before. This is Orenco Station in Hillsboro, Oregon, and just as a visual example of what we're looking at when we talk about buffered sidewalks. And you can see on the right there is a planter strip with that sidewalk, and then buildings brought right up to the sidewalk. Here's another view of the opposite side of the intersection with a buffered sidewalk. This is an example from Texas where things are much larger, I hear. This is a very large, it looks like 20 or 30 feet planter strip. We're not proposing any things that wide, but the concept is there that it separates the pedestrian with landscaping and provides opportunity for expansion of the street in the future. This is an example of a bulb-out crossing. So not only are we looking at State Street itself, but also the streets that intersect State Street, and we want to provide as many pedestrian-friendly amenities as possible, including bulb-out crossings, where the sidewalks are brought really close together at the crosswalk, so that the time that a pedestrian is in the street is minimized. And here's a more urban type example where you've got trees and tree grates, but the bulb out remains with angled parking in this case.
Can I go back a couple of pictures? Yep, it's the last one. The one thing that
this one, sorry.
You know what? Really, any of them is that because of the trees, which are beautiful, the signage and appearance of the buildings is you really can't see what the business is there. Does that create some potential challenge? I know we've got now the opportunity for the sign. What do we call them? The pole
monument sign.
The monument signs.
Yep.
But really, to me, as I look down all the streets that you've shown, except for the Starbucks that was on the corner, I guess that it's really kind of hard to identify what those businesses are with the landscaping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we put in those trees on University Parkway, we realized that exact same problem. We actually made we showed a rendering of what the new tree is going to do to the pole signs, and we realized, well, we can't just put in these standards and expect it to, and not to be some give and take elsewhere. And that's why we've taken another look at the monument sign regulations, so that there's an alternative, an attractive alternative that's larger and closer to the ground and underneath the tree canopy, that would be visible for cars, because obviously if you have a pole sign now with street trees, that's going to be obscured.
I think a monument sign on the Starbucks side over there would work, but even a monument sign on the right side of the screen.
Well, and this, if I can just address this, is an extreme example. Oregon obviously has lots of shrubs and plants and things. We're not expecting that to be the requirement. Yeah, we're expecting it to be more tree.
An observation is
lower growing stuff.
When the buildings are closer and the trees are there, the signage really becomes a challenge.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a shift in what type of signage is most effective. And we see that as more monument signs, those blade signs, wall signs, where the buildings themselves, since they're brought closer to the street than they could have before, begin to act as an advertising piece themselves.
Could see some A-frame signs, those they could put it on the sidewalk, those types of things as well.
Cafe signs, things. But that is a great point.
And from a maintenance standpoint, who maintains the greenery in the strip?
Property owner.
Yep. So this is, sorry.
Oh, that was me. I was just, if you can go back to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which one?
The one with the Starbucks.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. I think the hope ultimately is that at some point these trees will mature to a point where they can be trimmed up to a point so that you can actually see the businesses still, but still retain, the canopy and the greenery that gives the aesthetic appeal.
Long-term view.
Yeah.
If you don't know this by looking at this picture, but this is actually a grocery store. On the other side is the entrance. So the parking lot and everything is internal. So the signage and main entrance is actually on the interior side. So, people living in this area know where it is. People driving through may not see that that's an actual grocery store. So I guess it depends on the use and the actual how you utilize that property.
I'm okay with the Starbucks side. That looks okay. That looks fine. The other side seemed to be a little tougher. Okay, sorry. Just a
no problem. Thought. So this is a street section diagram. If we were to take State Street and slice it in half and look at it from the side, this is the right-of-way that we currently have. From curb to curb, we have 101 feet, and then a 6 to 9 foot sidewalk. It varies at points. And then from back of sidewalk, our current standard is 20 feet from back of sidewalk to where property owner can locate their building. And so if you just look at the position of the sidewalk as I go to the next picture, you see that is flipped. We're essentially taking what was previously that setback requirement with the landscaping, that is being brought to State Street, and then we have the sidewalk behind that. And what's great about this is not only does it provide that protection, it actually increases the amount of space that usable, buildable space for the property. So before, if you add them up, 20 plus 9 from back of curb, now we have a 15-foot landscaping strip and then an 8-foot sidewalk, so that's 23. We're actually increasing their property by about 6 feet or so. And as you can see, there's a few dashed lines there at the 8-foot mark. When we're looking at any type of future transit or expansion of State Street, we don't want to have to take out trees or remove signs or remove poles, street lamps. And so in the future, if that right-of-way were to be expanded, and we've talked with Paul Goodrich about how much right-of-way would be needed, and it's 7 feet on each side. So it would go from 101 feet to 115 feet. And that would just take out a little bit of the landscaping, and nothing else would have to relocate.
So do either one of you know what the widest sidewalk is we have on State Street right now?
That's the widest one I found was 9 foot, but it varies from 6 to 9.
It varies depending if you have an older building that actually has sidewalk and then, concrete in front of that, it could be 15 feet or.
I was going to say, I've seen some, I think, that are.
It depends. The actual
wide.
sidewalk portion, though, is probably 8 to 9 feet at the max.
Yep, and we also wrote in the code that it would be measured 8 feet would be the sidewalk width, and so if you tried to just pave your entire front, that's not considered sidewalk. It's only the 8 feet portion that would be considered sidewalk, and then with that that incentive, going back to the incentive for those public open spaces. One of those incentives is a little bit of flexibility with the building setback. You can see on the left-hand side there is an additional 10 feet permitted if one of those open spaces open to the public were provided, so that there's some flexibility there for building location. So in that neighborhood meeting, we asked, just looking down the road in the future, what kind of impact transit might have on their businesses, and more than 50% said that it would have a positive impact. 26.7% negative, and then 16.7% said it probably wouldn't have any significant impact. Just visualizing what this could look like, 20, 30 years, as a long-range vision for the corridor. Here's a view of the Smith's property just across from us, and as you can just kind of imagine, as buildings are brought up closer to State Street, that frees up all that property behind for, in the initial term, surface parking. And then as we develop those street connections, those mid-block connections, you start to see that infilling. And then in the far future, when we get higher density, higher property values, then there would be justification for structured parking and then transit down the center of State Street in the future. In that neighborhood meeting, we asked about those cross streets, and overwhelmingly, everyone thought that was a good idea to start to break up those large mega blocks that we have to make it more pedestrian friendly and to increase the frontage of businesses, which is very important to them. So the 15% small renovation exception applies, as was mentioned earlier, just to the square footage of the building, and it's tied to the building because larger buildings, it would require more to relocate a large building up to State Street than it would a smaller building. So we've tied it to be proportional to the size of the building. And just to reiterate, this is more flexibility than what we currently have. Currently, it's 10%, and we're proposing 15%. And when we asked our neighborhood, they either said it was about right or it should be a little bit higher. I've kind of covered this. I don't want to reiterate too much. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Was there a question? Just go ahead and be quick. Okay. We've already talked about a lot of this. Which sign type did they prefer the most? It was monument signs at that neighborhood meeting. We looked at other incentives for replacing pole signs, including reductions in parking requirements, larger wall signs, building heights and bonuses, and again, more monument signs came out as the winner. So monument signs are really the direction we're seeing in the future. And then again, we've got the districts with specific tree species that we've worked with and narrowed down with our urban forester. He's helped us find tree species that would thrive with the conditions on State Street. So just to visualize with the current conditions and what this could possibly do in the future with added medians, monument signs, buildings brought up closer to the street, you can see this adds to the aesthetic value.
Yeah, I like the way it looks.
Thank you.
Originally or?
No, I knew it didn't.
Okay. So, and when we asked of all of these different proposed updates, which were the top priorities, and number one were those buffered sidewalks. And the the impact, when we asked what they thought about that digital poll, most people said they liked it. And again, this is on, go ahead.
About 28 people who came to this, is that right? When you said the poll?
About 100 people.
Okay.
Only 28 or 30 chose to participate in our poll.
Okay.
But they were there and able to vocalize, ask questions, so it wasn't necessarily reflected in this, but they were there present at the meeting.
Okay.
Yep. And they had comment cards as well if they didn't want to use their smartphones.
Oh.
So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the council? Councilmember Summer?
Good job, Christian. I appreciate what you've done. A couple of questions on the beautification. Have you done any, keeps going through my mind, this is going to cost a lot of money for the developer or whoever does these improvements. Is there any cost analysis of how much this will cost to improve his property or per foot, or is there any comparison? Or
the only cost I could see would be with the landscaping. But there are landscaping requirements now.
Yeah.
So it's
expensive.
It's just a different configuration of landscaping. So I don't see any large difference in costs except maybe a few more trees along.
And changing the sidewalk. I mean, that would be the main.
Yep.
Those developers that have done it seem to be willing to flip the sidewalk. So.
Yeah, just a further comment. Right now, they're required to put 20 feet of landscaping behind the sidewalk. So really, you're not necessarily requiring more landscaping. You're just changing its location to put that 15 feet right next to the street, then your sidewalk, and then your building. So, we've done this in several of the PD zones that have come through recently on State Street. We've required them to put in that buffered sidewalk concept. To my knowledge, that hasn't seemed to be a big hurdle for them.
They haven't complained about it. Okay.
I'd imagine they'd see that as a benefit because the foot traffic is not separated by 20 or 15 feet of landscaping to get in the front door.
Plus, they are picking up some buildable area as well, closer to the street, and reducing the amount of landscaping we require. So there is some trade-off there as well.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
All right, any other comments from the council? So this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to make a comment, please come forward and give us your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Brad Woods. I was a founding member of the Orem City Transportation Advisory Commission, and I've been advocating plans such as this for many, many years. I applaud Orem City Planning for doing this, and I advocate that the council vote in favor. Thank you very much.
Good for you. Thank you. Anyone else wanting to make a comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public portion of this public hearing and bring it back to the council. Any other comments, questions?
I just want to compliment the citizen for a succinct, beautiful 20-second report. Thank you very much. Hopefully we on the council could be quite as efficient. Thank you very much.
Oh, your time's up, Tom.
We have two sides of the spectrum here, but anyway.
Lengthy side and the quick side.
So, any other comments by the council?
I just a couple of thoughts. So
from the lengthy side, go ahead.
On the lengthy side, I can't comply with the. So from a long-term standpoint, one thing that has run through my mind, and we've talked about it a little bit, Jamie, is just the future of retail and the future of, as we continue to get more and more internet access. And so part of the concern or part of the overall thought is, as it becomes more difficult to manage a retail store because of the dynamics of the business environment towards retail, are the things that we're asking going to make it easier or more difficult for retail stores to be successful in that environment? And is it going to make it easier for retail stores to want to move there as opposed to want to move away from there if there's more retail-friendly scenarios?
One thing, and so you'll have to excuse my youth. It's not been too long since I was in academia studying at the University of Utah, and one thing that was...
Oh, that's the problem.
I know, there you go. Well, I studied at BYU beforehand. So.
You repented.
Yeah. One thing that was very often brought up was that exact point. Retail is changing. The experience of buyers are changing. I've done most of my Christmas shopping online. But if you look at the areas that are doing very well economically, commercial areas, you think of places like City Creek or downtown Provo along Center Street. And what those offer are experiences. And people are not only shopping for products now, since they can do that at home, they're shopping for an experience, a downtown, a nightlife, a place to go get ice cream and then, or dinner and then ice cream and movies and hang out with their friends. And that's kind of the direction we're seeing, away from more big box retails and more towards those finer grain developments where you've got more mom and pop type businesses that line a corridor. And what this works to do with the setbacks being brought up closer to the street, it starts to create that experience. And I think this responds quite progressively to the changing dynamics of retail in the future.
I really like the clustering. I mean, to me, it seems like the concept of you go there and you can get multiple things done in a location, a pleasant environment, I think is nice. The appearance along State Street certainly would be nice.
Well, trying to reinforce that with our districts, and so it'll be something.
And then I do think the incentive aspect, I like that, to try to say, what can we do to help you make this transition smooth and viable, I think is also very positive. So, thank you.
Any other comments from the council? I'd like to make a motion. I move that the City Council amend by ordinance Sections 22-2-1, 22-8-5 C2 zone, 22-8-7 the C3 zone, 22-8-8 the zone development standards, 22-8-9 landscaping, 22-11-2 reserved, Appendix U and Appendix SS of the Orem City Code. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We'll start with Councilmember McDonald.
Aye.
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 Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ordinance passes. Thank you very much, both of you. We'll now go on to a public hearing, budget amendment. This is an ordinance amending the current fiscal year 2016-17 budget. Richard, Manning, and Brandon are our presenters. I'll turn the time over to them.
Thank you, Mayor. We set up here. I'm sitting on the efficient side. And I just need to apologize. Last week, Brandon and I attended a conference, a multi-day conference that had a few days of, about half a day was in just accounting regulations. And it was the longest 3 weeks of my life. So I apologize for what we put you through. This is our quarterly budget amendment where we recognize the grants have come in. The big thing here, there are two big items. We refunded a outstanding sales tax bond, and that needs to be recognized. And then moving surplus money from the general fund to the CIP so we stay in compliance with the law. That has to be done before this fiscal year ends. So, since it's the efficient side, any questions? If you do, ask Brandon.
This is under Utah Code 32-.24 subsection.
So a question is, we're moving some capital improvement project fund money?
Remember, we finished the year above the 25% cap and our 15% policy. It's moving it out of general to CIP. Okay. So we don't get a nasty letter from the state at the end of this year.
And this isn't affected by the new law, right? As far as noticing and having a separate.
Oh no, that
relates to general
becoming 2 weeks
enterprise funds, but that's not. Just want to make sure we're not there.
No.
Councilman McDonald has a question.
Gentlemen, I think this is so we're paying for items with cash instead of debt, what we've talked about. We have some excess cash, and we're using it to pay for capital improvement projects. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. No other comments from you at the moment? Okay.
Nope.
This This is a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to make a comment, please come forward. Hold your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name. Seeing no one's coming forward, we'll bring it back to the council. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we amend the current fiscal year 2016-17 budget and by ordinance amend fiscal year 2016-17 budget.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Seastrand.
Aye.
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 Okay, the ordinance passes. Thank you, Richard and Brandon. Appreciate it.
We got to go do it right now.
Jamie, do you have any items? Okay, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Okay, hurry.
All right, man.
They're worth it.
I'm sorry you got so unlucky that you had one of our longer meetings. Hey, it's over now. Thank you. Guys didn't. It was too much of your youth while you were waiting for us to. Thank you.
Did you see how fast they came up and it was like that here? Thanks for serving.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Michael Walker.
Michael Walker.
Yeah.
Planning commission.
Oh, really?
Different Michael Walker, obviously.
Yeah. I wanted to do that, but I haven't never got the time to do it.
So, there's a planning commission, they do have a form that you can fill out online if you want to help out on one of the commissions.
Oh, no, I got it. Okay.